fund that we might be looking at, and specifically for affordable housing. I was just being impatient and wanted to be able to get the project moving sooner. And Bill has a better handle on the finances of the town than me. So.
Hey, Paige, it's Larry. I have a quick question.
Sure.
Didn't the state identify that section as one of the top 10, top 15 dangerous intersection in the state?
I don't know that it's in the state, but it's certainly, we had a Serpent study done, and it is absolutely rated as a very dangerous intersection due to, I mean, the one with Commercial and Central is also dangerous, but the rate of speeds are so low that they're more fender benders and less personal injury. Whereas up at Walnut Street, the speeds are so high that any accident you have up there has a much higher incident of real injury and possible, the death. So that is a higher priority and the highest priority of that whole corridor. Yes.
And that section of road, that 140, that section is it's under the jurisdiction of the state, correct? It's not the town.
That is true. Okay. And so, and you'd say, okay, well, why wouldn't the state pay for all this? And unfortunately, that's why I say it isn't on the top 10 list of the state. Every state, the state has hundreds of these intersections. Yeah. This isn't a high priority for the state. That said, I felt like we were pretty effective. I mean, we did get the $200,000 design that we've done so far is totally on the state's dole, shall we say. That was through a grant from the state. So that felt right to me. I'm like, this is a state highway. This should be done. And then that's why this MassWorks grant is so important, because that we believe will fund the actual signal itself. And that'll be estimated over $1 million. And it only seems right that they should pay for that as well. The problem is if we're not poised and able to take advantage of it, they can't give it to us. So that's the balancing act. I would love to get another $30,000 from the state. I just don't think we will in enough time to, so much of it. And that's why that 35,000, to Dennis's point, like, while we didn't spend it this year, those who've been on the board have heard me say this before, like having it there sometimes as leverage, like if you put in X amount, 10,000, you might get 50 or 100. So, and if I have to wait for a town meeting, then that means I've missed that opportunity. So that's why in this instance, I understand we might not want to spend $30,000 on that intersection, but if we don't, I can guarantee you it will sit for another 5, 10, whatever many years, and we won't get the Walnut Street project, the affordable housing that's needed there, and we won't get that safe intersection made safer, and it trickles down. So,
okay, all right,
yeah, thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, just to elaborate a little bit more on Paige's points, that it wasn't that I said no. I basically said I looked at it. I said we should look at other alternatives because spending money out of our budget for that is something that I think we have other resources, and that is that we have the Affordable Trust Fund, which is like $320,000 in that account. And I said, maybe, and it's something we should talk to the board about to see. We have to get their opinion on it as well, and so we're going to spend that kind of money. It really is the appropriate thing to bring before the board for consideration. So we just talked about that literally this afternoon, and I just didn't want to dip into the budget that deeply, for something which is a project which I think really is tied directly to affordable housing. So I think that's the reason why I wanted to go in that direction. So. Paige, I have no issues with Paige. Paige knows that. She does a wonderful job. But I just want to be clear about my reasoning for that was that there are alternatives that we should explore before we consider doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, my comments were in jest. I mean, Bill. Again, Bill's the financial guy. I'm the planner, so I defer to Bill. But it was just ironic that it came up today, and I thought Bill was going to go for it, and I couldn't believe it when he was.
We know, Paige, when you made the comment, Bill walked away, so it was perfect.
I like to say yes to Paige as much as I can, but this is one, as I said, not so much. So, anyways,
great.
Okay. Hey, Paige, I have a question. I'm just curious. I was looking at the highlights, and one of the last bullet point was you're going to work with Rentham and Plainville to promote our region as a destination place. So I'm just curious, what are you thinking of?
Okay, so we got a grant for $75,000 for the Mass Gaming Commission. Yeah. And last year we were able to have what's called a regional destination marketing plan done. And so we were able to, with those funds, hire a consultant, a tourism consultant, and she came in and did an inventory of all 3 towns. And in fact, you could see the study. Our EDC website is www.choosefoxborough.com. And on there, you can find our regional destination plan if you look through the tabs and look through the whole thing. But what's exciting is we right now, with the remaining of that, we didn't spend all the money on that. Right now, I have a request for quotes out for web design. So we're going to have with the mass gaming funds. And the reason we have to work with Plainville and Rentham is obvious. We have to support the casino. Like basically, they're only looking to help the casino, so we're leveraging that. But it's been great. So now we're going to have a website so that what we're ultimately hoping is, like, for example, over 20 million visitors come to this region between Rentham Village Outlet Mall, Patriot Place, Gillette, and the casino. 13 million visitors a year prior to COVID, go to the outlet mall. So a lot of those folks are from Europe and from outside the region. They go to Boston, they stay the whole time on their vacation in Boston, and they take a charter bus out to Rentham for the day, and they go back. We'd like to be at the table where maybe like a small conference or whatever, or visiting, have them come out and stay out here, stay at the Renaissance at Patriot Place, take a shuttle over to Plain Ridge, go to the outlet mall, maybe have a little conference at one of our venues. So we're trying to get ourselves in that sort of table. And also now with COVID, we think that there'll be more local travel. Once the vaccine gets around, people might not be flying, but they might be driving. So we're hoping to leverage some of that and get some visitors to come to our region and sort of visit our amenities, our downtowns and whatnot.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions for Paige? No?
All right, everyone.
I guess thank you for coming in. If we have any questions, we will give you a call, but it looks good.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, before we jump to the next department, I just have a quick housekeeping. Brian and John Mahoney, I know when we did the roll call for minutes, I didn't hear from you and I didn't see the screen. So if you want to vote, I'll let you vote on the minutes. If you don't want to, that's okay.
Larry, Jack is here as well.
Okay. Yeah, Jack. Hi, Jack. So Brian, John, and
Larry.
Jack, if you want to vote on the minutes.
I'm fine with the minutes. I reviewed them. They look good to me.
I'm fine with the minutes.
So yes.
Yes.
Yes, I also had to find the link like Jack did, so I was able to quickly email it to him.
Are you okay with the minutes, John?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. All right. So I'll make sure that the minutes reflect the three of you. We just didn't see you, and I didn't hear anything. All right. Okay. Next on the agenda is the conservation manager, Jane Pierce. I think I saw her. Here you go. Hi, Jane. You're mute. You're still mute, so you can unmute yourself. Yeah, you're good.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Hi, Jane. Welcome.
Hi.
And good to see you again. So the floor is yours.
Well, I don't really have a whole lot to say because my budget was level funded completely except for the salary, which I didn't do. That's put in automatically, and the budget increases for that were for longevity and step increase. So I just did the same as last year as requested.
Okay.
Any questions? Do you all have any questions?
Sharon, do you have anything you want to add?
No, Jane and I met and everything was straightforward, so I have no questions.
Okay, it looks like a pretty straightforward budget. Anyone have any questions?
Larry, I have a question. It's not necessarily for Jane, but since she just mentioned it, I'll ask. It's probably more of a question for you, Bill. But Jane had just mentioned the longevity that's kind of out of her hands. Is that anywhere just to kind of understand how that works? Obviously, we see it in the budget book, but I have to admit, I don't know too much about what the parameters are, how it works.
But as a contractual, Jane is a member of the union, and so that is a contractually obligated program that is built into the contract itself. It is it's the same numbers. Those numbers have not changed in the 7 years that I've been here. If anything, we've been looking to try and get rid of it altogether because I'm not a big fan of it. but it is what it is. It's been in there, and it's difficult to get out because once it's in the contract, it is in. But it's based upon the amount of hours, the amount of years that you've been in service with it, continuously in service with the community. But it is, something it is in the contract, and Jane is properly entitled to receive it.
I would just add, Bill, having dealt with many unions over the years, it's a very common feature of a union contract.
It is. I've never been a fan of it, though, to be honest with
Yeah,
you.
I had seen it in some non-union areas. That's what made me think that it was a different type of policy, so.
I think the issue gets addressed with, the longer you're here, that's how we work through the step plan, and that's why you get rewarded that way. But being here just for the sake of getting a bonus just for the sake of being here and there's no reflection on Jane, by the way. It's just nothing to do with you. I want to be very clear about that. We're not thinking this is not a Jane issue, but I just have concerns about it because I'm not sure it really truly is a benefit to the community or to the employee in many ways. Because when you put a number on the number of years you've been in a place, I think the value could be significantly different than that. But it's just, but they put a number to it because it's another way of enhancing salaries.
Well, I didn't put it in there. It was just automatic.
I know, so it's not your fault. I'm not blaming you. Believe me.
I prefaced it with that, Gene, not at you.
All right, so that's the rough and tough explanation of it, but that's what it is.
Any further questions for Jane? No? Okay. I guess, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Perfect timing, Tony.
You got it.
I know. I was looking for you. I was stalling, looking for you guys. So next on the agenda is the municipal building director, Tony Musali. I hope I got your name right.
You sure did.
Tony, I know we're a few minutes early, but if you're ready, let's do it.
Let's do it. Yep. So anyway, good evening, everybody. My name is Tony Musali, Director of Facilities for the town of Foxborough. I also oversee, take care of the schools also and the municipalities. Anyway, it was a busy year this year. It was the COVID. And a lot of stuff that we took care of, a lot of plexiglass, a lot of disinfectant. We went through the library, we did public safety. It was just a busy year trying to keep everybody safe and spraying and like I said, it was like getting the PPE was one of the hardest things at the beginning. But we sure to get it, and we got the masks, we got everybody, to keep everybody safe. And the budget is pretty much kind of the same. The only thing that goes up is obviously the utilities every so often, and the budget I think is going up by 2.5% for the whole budget, which includes the utilities and salaries, and pretty much it. And I'm open to any questions or any comments or anything. Tony, it looks like electricity went up quite a bit, but heating fuel went down.
Yeah, it varies. It just I know we get credits from I'm not really involved with the farms as much. I pretty much just taking care of the buildings. I think a lot of that comes from the.
I see the
Brian, I can try and address that for you. That was one of the areas where, first of all, more and more of our buildings are electrically operated as opposed to heating oil operated. So, but the other thing is that we realized, or we were informed this year that we actually were getting a little bit too much credit for our solar credits as opposed to what they actually overcredited us. So as a result, they're giving us a new status for that, and so it's going to increase that number a little bit higher this year.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If I ever get stuff, I would.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, hi, Tony. Dennis Keefe. Just a quick question on your salary and wages.
Sure.
I've seen it in a lot of budgets. It's sort of like the longevity question. Is a line item for stipends.
Yep.
Can you talk to us about what those stipends are for, what they are paid for?
All right, so basically, one part of it is my assistant, which is his full salary. The other part of it is a stipend that I get, and then the rest of it is overtime. That's how it's. I get paid mostly from the school side, but my assistant gets paid from the town side. And then any overtime that my guys come in on the weekends and, for public safety, boy, and something happens, that's where the overtime is from.
Is the question related though, Tony, to what is the stipend represent? What is it for? What is the stipend for? What does it represent? You get paid for a certain amount for the stipend. What is it what's it for? What's the stipend for?
That's for me, for the town side. It's been like that from day one.
Okay.
I just get a small, because like I said, my salary comes from the school side, but I get a stipend from the town side. But then my assistant gets paid from the town side.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tony, a question on the telephone. Roughly, this is for how many people this expense related to?
Basically, I have it written down here. On the telephones, it's public safety, town hall, library, recreation. And I believe COA too. Not sure on that one, but I know the other four for sure. That's the 4 buildings that get paid for.
Oh, no, I was just trying to get a sense because 45,000 over 12 months, it's shy of, call it $3,800 a month. So I wasn't sure how many people, is that also?
Oh, that's a lot. It's every office in the town hall. It's a public safety building. Every phone in there. It's quite a bit. The library, and recreation is not much. They've only got a couple of phones, but it's mostly all the offices, town hall.
Tony, is it landline? Those are landlines, right?
Yeah, I really don't get involved too much with the phone system. That's basically IT. You know what I mean? Because most of the phone systems are IT related. But yeah, eventually it would be a landline when it leaves the building. I don't know, which direction.
I'm just curious if it's Verizon or is it voice over internet protocol. I'm just curious. It is a decent number.
I think it's Verizon. It's probably Verizon.
Okay.
I would have to say it's Verizon.
All right. We can ask somebody else for it. Go ahead, Tom.
Right. Like I said, I basically take care of the maintenance budget itself, but the utilities, I really don't have too much a hand on that.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
all I do for utilities is put in efficient units in, if I have to replace a boiler, if I have to lighting, that's the kind of stuff that, I make sure gets done,
Mr. Chairman,
the side of it, I don't.
The phone system itself is actually we have Verizon service, but we also have voice over IP system.
Yep.
So all the entire buildings are all interconnected, but it's based over a Verizon. I believe it's a Verizon internet service, if I'm not mistaken. It's either Verizon or Comcast. I'm not mistaken, but it's also there's a lot of interconnectivity with that as well, and so that in terms of all the various buildings, and so some of that is it's also I want to say it's data-based as well. So I believe so. It's a question that's best asked and answered by Aaron Heyer in this case.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Tom?
Was a new SEMREC facility added to this as a new building, or is that a separate contract?
No, that's a separate entity altogether, Tom. That's a regional entity that has its own budget, and this board will not be will not be voting or taking action on that budget at all. It's all done by the 4 managers that manage that for the towns. That we will actually approve that budget, but the charge back to the only thing that gets approved or reviewed by this town is the charge itself, which is a yearly charge And I think it's this year, it's about $300,000, if I'm not mistaken, which was the same amount it was last year. We're actually going to meet. We have a meeting scheduled for next week to go over things just to confirm that. But that's the number that it didn't go up from last year, is what we're saying.
Okay, so we'll probably end up talking to them when they come before us also, but since it's on the table right now, so is there any other services the town provides to the SEMREC facility that would be budgeted items, or?
No. It's really just it's just that one cost.
Okay.
Other than the time that we spend as board members to go up there, and that's really it's like every 2 to 3 months we have a meeting to go over stuff. So it's not a big time commitment.
So plowing is not part of that?
No, that's all. And if all their plowing is contracted by SEMREC itself.
Okay, cool.
Any cost related to that operation is all paid for by the SEMREC budget.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Hey, Tony, I just have a quick question. It's just, I noticed in fiscal year 2020, you have a credit for COVID-19 expenses, and then you have nothing for 21 and nothing for 22. I'm just curious. I know it's probably charged to your department, but I'm just curious why you don't have any COVID-19 expenses.
Well, I think what you see there is probably money that we've got back. That was what happens is I end up buying it and then they get reimbursed. So I think that what you're seeing is reimbursed money that we got back.
That's exactly right, Tony. We got money back from the federal government for that expense, and it was accredited back to their account.
Okay.
Okay.
Paul?
I was just going to say, I think you see that in a lot of the departmental budgets, right, Bill?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
All right.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead, Marie.
I'm sorry,
Mr. Chairman.
I just got clarification. So that telephone line, it pays for all the landlines and the internet for most of the town buildings. That's why it's significantly high. It's not cell phones, it's landlines and internet. And the credit you were just talking about, that's let me just see if I could, the 12,382. Yep. That's what was put back into the budget. So he spent that much in COVID expenses, and you'll see another credit in there for 2021 once we finish with the reimbursements for this year.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Any further questions for Tony? Okay, Tony. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Thanks, Tony.
Good night.
Thanks, Tony.
Okay, next on the agenda, we're about 15 minutes early. Next on the agenda is the general government, and that's Bill Keegan and George. So, Bill, George, all yours.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, did you want us to go over the selectmen's budgets and the town manager's budgets? And then we have several different lines as well, including town council, the pension numbers, the health insurance, the general insurance, all those accounts. So I'll start off with the selectmen's budget, and that essentially is a flat number, but over last year. What is under consideration? We're looking at the $12,000 expense. We've been paying a little bit more closer attention to that, primarily because we've had the system now for board docs for about 3 years, and going on a 4th year right now. And we're taking out how to look at that to see if, in fact, we're getting the best bang for our buck with that, because it's an interest. The system works well, but we're not sure if we're getting all the bells and whistles we want to get from, or all the use out of the bells and whistles that we have. So we're looking at taking out how to look at that. Not only that, but the company who actually who actually sells this to us, board docs, was just recently acquired by a bigger company. And so they're coming out with newer versions of what this software can provide for us. And for anybody who's new to this, I'm sure there's new board members that we're speaking to tonight. What this does, it provides the board of selectmen with a meeting tool that provides them with all the backup information, all the agendas, everything associated with the meeting. It's all done online, and they can actually do it by actually looking it up through the internet. It's actually a cloud-based system, And then we actually have ability to look up documents, add documents if we need to, any information that requires that's additional information for the board to on a particular item can be all scanned and loaded into that system and provided to the board. What it has done over the past several years is eliminated a lot of our need for storage of documents on each individual basis. Many of the selectmen over the years would end up with huge file cabinets in their basement as a result of all the papers and documents they would receive over the years. This system effectively it does provide a technology-based information management system for the board, as well as provide them with a meeting process that can be used and helps transform the information into minutes for their meetings as well. Now, we've also looked at the prospect of maybe extending this service out to other boards. There is an additional cost to doing that. We think we're looking into that prospect right now, but I'm not sure that we don't think it's going to be something we're going to push for this fiscal year. We're going to look maybe next fiscal year, because there is, like I said, a new version of this coming out under a different name. It's the same. It's the company who's acquired Board Docs altogether. So Board Docs is not being updated, but Leah, who's actually listening in on tonight, her and I have already talked about this and something that we want to pay closer attention to see if, in fact, we can get a better deal for this. Now, if the $12,000 is only for the Board of Selectmen, so I think the reason why we're looking at this, and rightfully so, is the fact that we should be able to extend this to other boards. And if we extend it out to other boards, today we were talking about this, we think we can probably get out to 8 or 9 boards pretty easily. And when you do it that way, obviously the cost per board is pretty low. So I think we want to try and get more value for the money that we're spending on this, even though in today's day and age, I think it's really important that we have this kind of a technology because of the COVID scenario we just went through. So we're in a different world where things have to be a lot more mobile, and we can actually do things, from home if we need to, et cetera. Last night, I did the meeting entirely from my house, had the Board Docs on my iPad, and I had my computer in front of me. And we were able to do the entire meeting from my house, and all the board members have been doing the same, just like you are. So I think conceivably we get to the point where this entire budget document could be downloaded, and you could have it available right on your computer, and then evaluate it from that perspective as opposed to having all these documents. So that's where we want to go. I mean, it's open for further discussion, but I think that's really the main budget item that's located in the budget. So as far as expense allowance, everything else is flat, and including the entire budget is flat. Actually, there's no increases at all for this year. But just so you know, that the dues and memberships, that's the MMA cost for each year. That's for the entire town. That's a membership in the Mass Municipal Association. And then the 5,400 is expense allowance. Each board member does receive a small stipend per year. The chairman gets a little bit more. And then we also provide some money for board members to attend conferences and meetings throughout the year. There are a number of different boards and committees that the board members can attend, but the problem is that obviously a lot of these have become virtual as opposed to real meetings, and so the costs have gone down, but the cost here we carry in the budget is pretty minimal to begin with. All right, any questions on that, Mr. Chairman? I'm happy to take those questions.
No, I think it's pretty straightforward. Okay, Jack.
Yeah, I have a question on obsolescence. As you keep all of the meeting records online or in a file, and then 2 years from now, you switch to a different company. I can go down to the town, to the library today and look up records of years ago of town business. Will I be able to do that, or will those records exist in a retrievable format?
So it's a good question, Jack, and I appreciate you asking it. So the answer is yes, and we always maintain a hard copy of everything that we provide, that we scan to each board member. The big difference is that we don't have to give to every single board member. We just say we maintain one copy of it and maintain it in a file. But the other thing that's important too, and we're required to do that by law, by the way. The other thing that's important too is that each of the boards, each of the selectmen's meetings are taped and are recorded by FCA TV. So we have each and every minute of conversation is actually in their archives as well. So we have two resources for going back and looking at those meetings, other than what we store in board docs. Now, if we were to switch from board docs, we would keep the files that we have stored on our main system, and then we would just carry that information with us. So there wouldn't be any loss of information on that basis.
Yeah, I wasn't speaking in opposition, understand. I just
I understand. Yeah, that makes sense. It's a good question. It's a fair question.
Following reasonable expectations for how a government is run and what its track record has been.
Okay, very good.
And Jack, all the meeting minutes are posted to the town page under the Board of Selectmen. So the board docs is kind of more of our internal view of some of the backups and stuff, but the minutes and the agendas are all still available in one continuous spot where they always have been.
That's correct.
And Jack, if I may, at work, we've been using something similar to this for the past 10 years. So all the documents, the person doing the upload, the administrator, what do you want to call it, that person has a physical electronic copy of everything that's been uploaded to the board, to the portal. So even if we switch, and sometimes they want to charge you to allow you access, and even if we don't want to pay and we have this dispute, we still have the original hard copy that was uploaded. So Bill is correct. There's some form of copy somewhere that we can produce.
That's right.
Usually.
That's right.
Any further questions for Bill regarding the Board of Selectmen budget? Now moving on, Bill.
Okay, thank you. So going on to the town manager's office, our budget is, so just an overview for the new members, that the town manager's office is responsible for a number of different things. Not only do we provide policy guidance for the Board of Selectmen and policy enactment for the Board of Selectmen. So in other words, they create the policy, we just enact it. But we also provide them policy guidance. So in other words, if they're interested in developing a new policy or procedure, it's up to us to provide them with some guidance and some information and assistance on that. The other thing is that we are the main chief administrative office for the town. So all major purchases, all purchasing is approved through the town manager's office. All HR functions are managed through the town manager's office. And we also have taken on public information, providing access to public information through major sources such as Facebook and Twitter, to provide access, social media access, as well as just general access to information for the public. We maintain the website as well, and we keep everything as up to date as possible. We do all of that with a staff of 4.5 members. The town manager, the assistant town manager, the executive assistant, who is Katie Lang, who handles all the licensing for the town throughout the entire town as well. The public information specialist is Christina Metcalf, who you've probably seen on many selectmen's meetings. So she does all the minutes for the selectmen as well. And the HR specialist is Sarah Ackerman, who is a part-time person who works and helps Mike Johns with a lot of the transitional type of actions that occur with HR, which are numerous, if not to say at the very least. So we have a lot of stuff that goes through this office on a regular basis. As far as the staffing, the expenses go for this year, we're looking at an increase of just 2.4% overall. We actually reduced our expenses this year by about 7%, but the baseline increase in wages up around 4%. And so we're down about 7%. So we actually were below the 2.5% guideline by about 0.3%. The key thing for us is that we also manage all the insurances, things of that nature for the town. I work directly with Maya. I actually sit on the board of directors for Maya, so I work with them on all our coverages, as well as all the like the property liability, workers' comp, and we'll get into that coverage a little bit more. But in terms of cost, but the good news is that we've been able to keep those costs down. We have a very, very active safety committee in town. In fact, we almost annually win awards for how well the town responds to its safety program. And we actually, we're also responsible for coordinating all the efforts with all the departments and making sure that the departments work cohesively. We are responsible for doing most of the hiring for all the town employees. And what's particularly important about us is that we try and set a culture of cooperation where people work together to try and get the job done well. And at the same time, we're actually trying to look at creative things all the time. The challenge is, of course, is that during this past year, it's probably one of the most challenging years I've ever endured career-wise because of all the situation we had with COVID. And we worked on that from day one, trying to coordinate things and provide the community with a lot of services that they would like to see. We couldn't do everything we wanted to do because we just couldn't put people in rooms together, and that was a real challenge at times. But we were able to at least keep the town running. I'm proud to say that we're one of the very few communities in Massachusetts that was fully functional and back up and running by July. In fact, there are still many towns and cities throughout the Commonwealth who are not back to work and still working from their homes, providing services to the residents on that basis. The reason why it was important for us to do this was a couple. One was the fact that we were able to continue our library services, our COA services, and to some extent recreational services on a much smaller scale. But we were also able to have that connection to people when they needed that help the most. And so if they needed to get into town hall, they could, and they could talk to us. They could pay bills in person if they wanted to, or they could just drop it in the mailbox. Most people opted for the drop in mailbox approach, and most people opted to call on the phone or ask us through email, etc. So we've gone to that. We've almost made the switch in many ways to a virtual approach, but there were still a lot of folks in town who want to do things in person. So what we did was we created a very safe environment for our employees, and I'm pleased to say that we've had a couple of cases of COVID. In fact, I was one of them. But it had nothing to do with anything I had at work. It was something that I caught from my wife, unfortunately, and the same thing with another couple of people in town hall who caught it, but again, not related to work at all. So we've had no incidents related to COVID in the building since we reopened in July. So I do, if you want to go, if you have any questions about any of the line items, I'm happy to answer them for you. But it's a pretty straightforward budget process for us. We didn't look to try and increase things as much as it was. We actually tried to take a very minimal approach. We've tried to follow the same words that we were talking about, and that was to try and keep the budgets down to a minimum this year for lots of reasons. The one question that has come up a few times is the salary for Mike Johns on the assistant town manager salary. The reason why that appears to be higher than normal is because that correction would have been made at the fall town meeting if we had done that. But we didn't do a fall town meeting this year, so therefore the number couldn't be corrected before we. So to give them a correct starting number for going into fiscal 22. So we are going to try and work through that for the remainder of this year, and I think we'll be okay. But just wanted to let you know that the number that is in the book is the correct number, and Maria's done a very good job of addressing that for us. There's actually a footnote in the bottom of the line that addresses that.
So it's not like there's two mistakes 2 years in a row. It's the same error.
That's correct. That's correct.
Last year. Okay.
That's correct.
Sorry, Larry.
That's okay. I was going to ask the same question. So Dennis, go ahead.
Bill, just a quick question. You budgeted $5,000 for office equipment maintenance for 21, and you're budgeting $4,000 for 22. Yet you're running through January about $7,000 of expense in that line item. Is there some kind of one-time issue that you're dealing with there?
It appears to be that a one-time issue. So all it takes is one thing to break, and then we can end up with a pretty significant expense. So mostly that expense line is for insurance purposes. I'll be honest, I have to defer. I have to go back and look exactly what that was. But I'm trying to think of what the exact, maybe Maria, if she's listening, could actually shed some light on that one, because I'll be honest, I don't have it off the top of my head as to what that expense was.
Okay.
Yes, that's the HR onboarding software.
That's what it was. Okay. So that was something we've been trying to do for the past 2 years. Actually, the system that we had before was the company spiked the price on us. to the point where we just couldn't afford to do it anymore. So, and then we went looking for one, and we finally were able to get one this year. And so, so we are using it, and it's going to be up and running. It's up and running. It should be up and running within the next few weeks. So,
not.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So on that same line of thought, between special events, the department, and the training and development, big picture, could you perhaps provide us what's the support for those two line items? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So the special events, we provide some support for for Foxborough Day, which is it's the Founders Day, which is actually which occurs in June each year. We didn't have to do it this year because we couldn't hold the event, but we also we budget for it every year just in case. If the money doesn't get spent, it gets put back into free cash. So as far as other events, we may do things throughout the year we also provide some support for, I believe it's for the Child Sexual Abuse Committee. We provide some money for them. It's in that line as well. So we provide some support for that committee as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
Leah?
So, sorry, I thought that the special events was going to be like the breakfast at Christmas. So you're saying that's for expenses related to Founders Day?
That's right. So we actually provide money for Founders Day. We pay a couple $1,000, like $2,000 to $4,000. I think it's $3,000 to $4,000 that we provide. Yeah, the breakfast that's done at Christmas is actually personally paid by Mike and I. We actually pay for that ourselves.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Any further questions for Bill? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Brad.
1 second. Okay. Hi, how are you? So,
good. How are you?
Good. So I knew I was going to have to ask it at some point because I had been thinking about this last week. Some of it may be ignorant, so you know where it's going. I'm just wondering, when you have a COVID times, at what point would you recommend a 0% increase? So why is it the 2.5? And maybe if you explain a little bit more for me tonight, I can put that to rest. Because as I'll say where I'm coming from, I mean, I do own a fairly large dental practice, and during COVID, it was different. We had to close for a few months, and we told our staff, we have to make it 0, no increase. Even though we talked about some raises, we said we either got to keep it flat, or we may have to let people go or cut hours. So we didn't do that, right? And I'm just wondering, in town government or the economy, how do you at what point would you have said it has to be 0?
Okay, so realistically, we could not do a 0. And I say that because unless we were able to reduce services. And the reason I said, I'm not trying to be a wise guy and saying that, but it's the reality of it is that it's a fair question. So I'm really glad you asked it because I want to be able to help explain it. The reason why, if you look at our increase, most of our increase is based on fixed costs. So things such as pensions, insurances, things of that nature are all going up higher than what we'd actually tried to do for other lines. The other lines, the basic lines, in the wage pieces, but for the most part, are contractually obligated. So there's a few people that we're negotiating with right now, and here's the challenge we face with that. We work in a very, very limited employment market. All right, and everybody, if we don't pay the competitive wage here, we lose those people next door, and that's how it works. I mean, I'm being entirely honest about that. So, and we were challenged this past year because we did not. We've been very, very conservative in terms of our budgeting practices for salaries and wages. In fact, we check on it. The last time we looked at our scale was probably about 5 years ago. So we probably need to look at it again. But the challenge we faced this past year, Brad, was that we ended up with a situation where we tried to hire a couple of department heads, and we found it extraordinarily difficult to get people to even apply. And some of that was because of the fact there was a limited number of candidates issue, that type of issue. The second thing was the fact that we felt that we could not compete against some of those salaries that were being paid in other communities. So we're trying to maintain our salaries in the middle of the range, not too far low, not too far high, but in the middle. And we try to, and actually, if you look at the information that if you look at our salaries on community to community-wide basis, we're actually right there. And I took a look at, the data where we are on a community, on a countywide basis. And Foxborough is actually right in the middle in terms of all of our costs and expenses. We're not, and that's really where you want to be. I don't think you really want to go too far low. You don't want to go too far high, because obviously we want to keep the community, attractive for people to come here. People want to live here, and they really do. They really come here for that value.
So I'll add to it, and I agree with you. This is the way I run my practice. It's interesting, like down the road at one of the meetings, I'm on with Brian and Sharon with the police and fire, not to give any preview, but I've noticed similar types of, increases. And I was just wondering, and maybe it's really good management that Foxborough is doing. That's great. That's why we're here. Is this a question I'm asking? At what point would it be, we got to hold things steady? And that's, I'm not the pessimist, and I'm not trying to, I know
it's a great question. It's a fair question. Yeah. It's a fair question. I don't take any offense to it at all. So I just want you to know that. Mm-hmm. So, but the reason I say that if we had to go to a zero environment, I would tell you that we would have to sound the alarm to do that, because even if I were to do that good of a job on trying to keep it at zero on the town side, it would be extraordinarily difficult to do it on the school side. So because you're dealing with special ed costs, you're dealing with a whole bunch of different cost issues that are really beyond our control. And I think that's what we try and manage it as best we can. But I'll tell you that that it's been very, very difficult this past year, especially when we're out some of the revenues that we've anticipated we've always had. Nothing at Gillette this year, the meals tax going down. Right. We're trying to keep all those costs in check, and we're doing that. That's why you'll see most of these budgets are pretty low for the most part.
Thanks, Bill.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Dennis, and then Leah.
Yeah, maybe just, here's a great question, Brad. Just an outside perspective, somebody that's been, in the private sector and has worked with unions over many, many years. Mm-hmm. The town, to a degree, is a victim of its own success, where you would have to really demonstrate severe hardship in revenues to be able to go to the unions and sit down with them and say, look, we have to go in a different direction here. And the town has not had to do that because of the revenue sources and the management and the ability really to hold everything together without working in a crisis environment. You have to really be able to demonstrate that to the unions and the union leadership if you really want them to come to the table and take meaningful action to really reduce their wages, give some give backs, things like that are very, very hard to achieve. So it's just my opinion, the town hasn't reached that point yet where those kinds of actions are really very, very necessary. They're very disruptive too, by the way. I don't think the town has reached that point yet.
Just along those same lines, I understand that, and I understand where we are with some of, the collective bargaining agreements that we have. But where I struggle with that is, ironically, aside from fire, Bill, your office has the highest amount of salary and wage increase where no one is union. So, where one could argue we do have that control, if you look at the budget book, your department has the biggest salary increase besides fire. So, we just talked about like longevity, for example, and the response is that I understand that's a collective bargaining piece, but that's, a line item here. So I think that's where I struggle. And you and I have talked about this a lot, that we do have control on some pieces. And I do think we have to take a look at some of these pay plans, because we can't just say, well, we need to treat them like their own union because they're not a union, because they're not a union, if that makes sense.
No, I understand. But again, that goes back to the market conditions as well. So, I mean, if you take a look at where our wages are, we're actually competitive with the rest of the world. And I can demonstrate that. I see the wages, and I'm not the highest paid town manager in the region. There's actually several that are paid higher than me. And Mike is not the highest paid assistant either. So there are several that are beyond him. So I think and neither of us really striving to do that. I think, as far as the technical support that we get from our staff, we're not doing anything more than 4%. Now, Mike's artificially is higher this year because of a correction in the pay plan and the budget, but it has nothing to do with Mike. I mean, Mike is not going any more than 4% at the max any one year. So I'm really reluctant to single those folks out because, quite honestly, if you take a look at them, they're just competitive. They're not overly paid. They're not underpaid.
So I guess I would say, you know, I don't necessarily agree that paying a step, a COLA, and a longevity is market. And if there's market data out there to show us, I think a lot of people here, you know, work in a number of different fields. And I don't know that we're doing ourselves any benefit dialing up, you know, a department that we do have some control over. So I do think that we should take a look at this. I think we need to really, you know, just give it a close look. Because like something like longevity, you know, I don't even understand who gets it and when and why for this group.
Okay, so that's part of the personnel wage plan, which are all members. For those, there's only 12 people in the entire town that are members of that plan. So I'd be very reluctant to treat them differently or less than what the 90% of the other employees are receiving, because especially if in the roles that they're in, it doesn't make sense to do that. The other thing that, and I think Dennis said it a few minutes ago, is that you know, first of all, our organization is 90% of its union. So we, you know, the fact remains is that we're trying to at least keep pace. You know, not overpace, but at least keep pace. And I don't get longevity. I think a few people do. That's simply because that's in the personnel wage bylaw. That's not their fault. That's the pay plan that we have.
Yeah, and I don't think we're talking about it being anyone's fault. I think we need to take a look at it because in my time here, I don't think it's really been ever discussed. You know, I'm coming up on 3 years and, you know, the world changed a lot. And I think it's something that we should be, you know, talking about every year.
Okay, well, that's fine.
Hey, Bill, if I could make a comment. And I know you and I talked briefly today, and you know, remember I asked you, I want the assistant town manager to be paid the right amount, and you said correct, he is. So I think the way I see it is that last year when the fiscal 21 budget was approved, I think the wrong step amount was put in, so it became like a double error, which is fine. So the way I see it is that whatever this amount in for fiscal year 22 is the correct amount.
That's correct.
Right.
Because,
so
yeah, the amount that's in the budget now is the correct amount.
Right. So last year was all the I guess the double error, whatever you want to call it. It happened last year.
Right.
So my suggestion going forward is I think we talked and I realized we do not have a special town meeting this year, so it's hard. So going forward next year, if management were to discover any pay errors subsequent to the town meeting, just notify the AdCom in the fall. Just tell them, hey, you know what? The assistant superintendent is, I'm making it up, is salary is off by 2,000. So you know, come March, when you see the budget, you're going to see more than the 2 plus 2. So it's not a surprise because over the years I've seen this happen before, and then usually we find out in March there's an error, which is fine. You know, you want people to be paid the right amount. I think for full disclosure, you know, mistakes happen. So if that happens, just tell let the AdCom know in fall. By the way, come March, you will see a correction.
Right.
Just a from a disclosure point.
I think part of it is also that we have we've also Maria's actually introduced a new process for, you know, a sovereign reserve account, which should address some of those issues anyways going forward. So it'll be less of a concern. We'll be able to correct them throughout the course of the year. Because quite honestly, things move around back and forth all throughout the year. People leave the position, a new person comes in, they get paid less, so that frees up money to do stuff in other areas that we can actually then, you know, resolve those kind of issues. So, but it really does make a lot of sense to do the way that she's discussing. It was something that they worked on in Concord, which has won numerous awards for their budgeting practices. So we're adopting those kind of approaches here. and she's brought a lot of those thoughts and thinking to the table here. So, but this is, if you take a look at an $85 million budget and it's one line, I can live with that.
Yeah.
In terms of mistakes. So I think, but we're telling you what it is. I mean, there's no surprise here. We're trying to, correct it once and for all. It's no fault of Mike's fault, so I wouldn't blame Mike for this. This was something that was, and it was created by, a situation that occurred at town meeting a couple of years ago. So it was just unfortunate that it did, and now it's being fixed once and for all.
Agreed. I just wanted to be fixed and then just disclose to the committee. That's all.
Sure.
Okay.
I get it. I do. Thank you.
Any further questions for Bill for the town manager's office?
Right here.
Okay, great, Paul. Paul and then Jack.
So Leah's question led to some confusion for me because I had done the same thing. So some departments, Bill, are in the salary reserve line, right? Those that have union COLA dependencies, but school, for example, is not in there, right?
That's correct.
All the increases are built in. So when I look at your department, is there a separate COLA piece in the salary reserve line, or is this
yes,
all
it would
in?
be just the 2%, but not for everybody. My salary doesn't get adjusted at all. It's just the entire amount is in the budget, and because my budget, I don't get a COLA. My entire wage is based upon performance.
So a lot of these are really 6% if you're just looking year over year.
No, it's 4%, 2% plus 2%.
So is the COLA in here in your general government? Or is it in the salary reserve line like a lot of departments?
Well, the steps are increased, and the step increases are in the COLA are in the line item, the budget line.
Yep.
Yes. Yep. So Marie, do you want to address that for him, please?
Yes, the salary reserve is for the union contracts only. Because historically for those, the town has always gone to a special town meeting. So to avoid that, that's why we're doing it this way for FY, or proposing it to be done this way. Non-union employees, which I don't even think there's 20 of us. I'm in the non-union plan, and so the lines for us include the COLA and the step.
That was my question. But for okay,
and
so
that's everyone in this budget.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Sorry about that, Paul. I misunderstood the question. Sorry.
So on several occasions, Bill has come back to the requirement, and I think we all agree, is that the town at the end of the day has to remain competitive salary-wise with other places that offer similar positions, like neighboring towns. When is the last time that the salary survey that presumably Mike maintains has been reviewed with members of the Board of Selectmen? Now, it has to be a confidential review, I understand, but I'm guessing from what I've heard that Leah has never seen it, and I'm not sure when was the last time that the board, who is ultimately responsible for the salaries, has reviewed whether we are indeed where we think we should be.
Well, I think the last time we had a comprehensive review was back in 2015-16. So I think it's probably a good idea to take that step at this point, just to see where we sit. And in fact, we're actually looking at that very issue because the union's coming back to us now and asking for us for increases that are well beyond what we currently are looking at. And we're saying, look, you got to justify where you're going with this because we don't see any evidence of that. So, we can certainly do that with the board. It's probably a good thought, Jack, to let people know where we are, so because we're not over the top. I can tell you that.
Yeah, and I explicitly would include the union positions because that's the bulk of the town.
Yeah, that's right. It's like 90% of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, from my notes, I think we also talked about COLA came up probably in another department last week as well. And going back over it, at least as far as Social Security, they said the COLA for the 2020 revised as well as for 2021 is going to stand at 1.3%. I went back to 2008, back to the financial crisis, and an average of those 13 years, the COLA has been 1.37. And yet, I guess I have to ask, is the 2% COLA, is that defined? Is it just traditional? or is that actually linked to some other kind of financial standard that we can use for negotiation?
Yeah, it's a COLA survey that we do with other cities and towns in Massachusetts, comparable cities and towns in Massachusetts stuff. So using the Social Security benchmark is not consistent with what we're seeing in the municipal market itself. So I mean, there's a lot of, and I understand why people ask these questions because they come from a private sector perspective, but in dealing with the municipal world, it's a different pay schedule. It's a different approach than what you're probably used to seeing, but it's a different market. So if we don't, and Jack just touched upon it, if we don't maintain competitiveness with that, we lose our skilled employees to other communities who will pay more. We just lost a person in the finance department just a couple months ago who had been with us for a while and took a job in another town because they paid more. So that's the reason why we're very careful about not losing our competitive edge and losing people, because we put a lot of time and effort into training people in our community, probably more so than most. And when we lose them, it's a loss in several different directions. We lost of time, a loss of investment, and a loss of a person who can really get the job done in a much more efficient way.
Any other questions for Bill? Oh, Dan, go ahead. Go ahead, Dan. You're mute. You're still.
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry, chasing the mute button there. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with everything you just said, Bill. But kind of going back to what Leah said originally, is there any websites you can share with us? Where you gather this data? Just sure. I have no doubt that Mike Johns is paid what he's worth, just based on his grasp of what we do in town and everything about him. But I think what I'm looking for, and I think Leah kind of is too, is where you're getting this information. And I have no doubt that it's exactly what we're looking at. I just think some of us would be interested in looking at it. So if we could an email with just some websites to check out or something, and show us where those numbers are pulled from, that'd be awesome.
I don't know if it's on a website, but we because Mike actually works on this data set himself, but the MMHR is the Mass Municipal Human Resource Association, actually does a what is known as a benchmark survey, and they do that every year. So and what we do is we look at that. In addition to that, we also try and look at, there's about 13 or 14 communities that we compare ourselves to try and maintain our competitive, because these are ones that are close to us and ones that typically draw upon. We steal people from them, they steal people from us. That's the way it works. And so as a result of that, that's the group that we would most likely be looking to try and maintain that. So
are we able to look at that information, or is it only your HR people?
Well, see, it's only given to the HR people themselves. If you're a member of the association, you can get that information. So Mike would have to actually compile that for you. So I'll see what we can do to try and get that for you, though. We'll try and get you some survey data.
I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Leah?
Yeah, that's, Dan, exactly what I was going to say. So where I work in the private world is an HR consulting firm, and we sell cuts of benchmarking data by industry.
Yeah.
I mean, you can cut it any way you want it, which it sounds like is what MMA has. So there should be like some kind of quick executive summary and then the down and dirty details. And I think every year, if you just show us the benchmarking data instead of just kind of talking to it, it will go a long way. And like the COLA, every year everyone says, oh, we look into it and it's benchmarked, but 2% every year I've been here, and probably as long as Larry and Tom and others remember. So it makes us think, is it tradition, or is this actually coming out of somewhere? So I think it would go a long way, at the start of the budget season, to let's do these cuts of, benchmarking and really lay the foundation rather than digging into this later in the process.
We can certainly do that for you, Leah. It's the first time we've really had that conversation in terms of doing that comparison, so comparative analysis, but we can do that. I don't have any concerns about that. And we'll get working on that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I've been asking about benchmarking for a couple of years, and I think we just need to look at the pay plan because it's no one's fault, but I don't think people that are on the pay plan should be managing the pay plan. I think it's kind of a direct conflict of interest.
Well, in fact, we don't do that because that pay plan is in fact is put out by the personnel wage board. They're the ones that they actually it's their pay plan. And also the selectmen weighed in this back when it was first established in 2015, 16. So like I said, it's been 5 years since we've looked at that. So it's probably time for us to look at it.
Yeah.
Again.
So I don't feel that's necessarily a correct statement. I think it was created in 2015 or wherever you're saying, but from what I understand from talking to Mike, he said that you, George, and him adjusted each year. Because I asked that.
Based upon the benchmark, where the benchmark increase, yes. But the base plan itself was originally put together by the Personnel Wage Board and the selectmen. So the only thing that gets adjusted each year is the 2% COLA. And that's consistent with what we see in the region. And in some cases, we're starting to see that creep up a little bit, by the way. So to even higher than 2%. So we've been maintaining it at 2%, and we don't feel the need to go beyond that at this point. But that's where we are with the market. That's the market that I've seen.
Hey, Bill, if I could add, AdCom has a representative on the Personnel Wage Board. And as of last year, when I asked the representative, have you attended a meeting? And the answer was no. So I just want to put it out there.
Yeah, there have been a lot of things for them to bring forward to the committee itself in recent, because they did a lot of work a couple of years ago, redoing policies and procedures. But they're more of they're an advisory committee because technically under the charter, the town manager is the personnel director.
Okay.
So it's actually, but they're an advisory committee. But
which is fine.
I didn't feel comfortable putting together a pay plan by myself. I wanted others to weigh in on it, including the board and the wage and salary board.
Agreed. But I think what I'm trying to say is if the representative from AdCom never attended a meeting, really, I don't know when was the last time the wage board convened a meeting.
I feel like it's almost been since when Mary Beth was here. It's been a long time, because I know I tried to get involved in it and there's just been nothing. Maybe there was some discussions when COVID came out around policies there, but again, those didn't come in front of the Board of Selectmen at all. I don't know if they need to, but I've looked at the bylaw myself because I've wondered the same thing, because it's kind of just a board that doesn't meet, and they're supposed to meet quarterly or as needed, and it's definitely not something that I feel like we're fulfilling.
Yeah, I was on the Personnel Wage Board back many years ago when we were the town personnel department. We made the personnel wage, we negotiated the contracts. Now, and when I looked at the regulations last year, I saw that the Personnel Wage Board is now a figurehead board that meets, I believe, quarterly, and therefore
or as needed,
has effectively no power.
Yeah, they don't have any authority per se, but they can recommend things. And so, as I pointed out, there hasn't been really a need to change anything. In fact, I think we did work with them. We worked with at least we worked with the selectmen. I know we worked with the various unions in developing policies during COVID. That was the last time we've done anything in the policy development wise. And those policies were more or less directed to us by the federal government or by the state government.
And I'd have to look at it, not to beat a dead horse, Bill, but I don't think it's as needed. It's at least quarterly or as needed, but I'd have to go refresh myself.
Yeah, I just don't know that we've had a need for them to meet though. I don't want to bring a board together to do something unless there is a genuine need.
But shouldn't they approve this pay plan that's filed every year? Like review it?
No, because the town manager does it. The town manager does that, and then they present it as part of the budget, and then ultimately everybody does that. So ultimately, like as I said before, I didn't feel comfortable developing the original pay plan because I wanted others to weigh in on that process before, so that we could have at least a good process going forward. And then obviously each year as part of the budget, I show those increases as a reflection of the budget process itself. So, I mean, we can do a whole discussion about wages, but at the end of the day, the town decided long before I came to town that that's how they wanted to do it. And so I'm just trying to fulfill that obligation in doing it. But I do think, when there's a need to meet with the personnel board, we certainly will do that. But right now, there hasn't been a real genuine need to bring them together that I know of. I mean, if somebody has a thought about what we should meet about, I'm happy to do it. But there hasn't been done to my knowledge.
Okay, I think we have discussed enough. So does anyone have anything new to ask Bill on his budget? Okay, if not, we should move on to town audit.
Okay,
George?
so that's not an increase. It's a flat budget as well, and it's a budget. It's a process that we conduct annually to review the town's expenses and make sure everything's being spent properly, and that we don't have any major concerns about spending money incorrectly or illegally or whatever the case may be. I'll defer to George in terms of the explanation of that even further, but that's really what it is.
Yeah, a number of years back, the state of Massachusetts used to do the audits, and they would send. They had teams of people who go around and they'd take certain regions. But I'm talking now back in around 1985, 1986, something like that. They discontinued the practice, and each town had to go out and get their own auditor. It's almost imperative that you have an audit done every year for nothing more than even the sake of the bond issuances. There's certain disclosures that have to be done through an audit that Standards and Poor's, Moody's are looking for just for that. But not to mention the other things of having somebody come in and make sure that there isn't something egregious going on, or even a mistake being made that nobody's catching. So it's something that you really can't not do. It's pretty much imperative to have an audit done every year.
George, if I may add, I think we all understand it's a straightforward budget, and I'm going to tell you, I'm impressed with still having the same price for the last 4 or 5 years. So no complaints here. So it's pretty straightforward. We know why. So in the interest of time, if does anyone have any questions on the town audit? If not, if it's okay, we should move to the next.
Just a comment.
Yep. Go ahead.
Just a comment. I talked to Bill about this actually. George, it's customary for every 6 years when you have the same auditor, maybe to bid it out and take another look at who might be out there that could be competitive and do a better job. So you're coming up on that 6 years. Is that something you're going to be looking at?
Well, I'll tell you, when I came in, Bill had mentioned the idea of, well, look, that we could be looking at a new auditor. But I'll be very truthful with you, with the turnover that took place in the finance department, we pretty much lost half the staff in there. Even some of the clerical end of it, along with all your major department heads. When we came in, we were kind of looking for somebody that would be a stable force in this particular case that did know their way around, that might have a little bit of an institutional memory. So, I mean, again, a year or two or whatever that 6-year mark is, or whatever they obviously we should look at it. But at the moment, we were kind of just trying to stand pat and at least not cause another upheaval in the office.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions?
Sorry. Just a general question. Reading the mission on the mission reading on the mission box. I'm just realizing it now, and maybe I didn't really pay attention much the prior years, but the audit firm, and I'm looking at it here again, and I'm reading it. There's a required audit of the school year and report to the Department of Education. So is it just one internal audit a company that provides all those different required reports?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So that's my question. And my second
Yeah.
question, George, is that I'm assuming, and I shouldn't say assume, but I get that we probably get a clean bill of health every year for all different audits.
Yes, we haven't, at least, and I mean, I can't go back, oh, geez, we've done a great job for the last 50 years, because I've only been here a year and a half, but at least the last two audits that have come in have come back clean. There have been no, I mean, what they would call, there were no material things. There's always, if they do an audit, there's always suggestions on, why don't you tighten this up or tighten that up. However, there hasn't been any material events to say, oh God, there's like $1 million missing or anything to that effect. So yes, we have been given a clean bill of health. Secondly, in answer to your question, it is the same company. It doesn't have to be, but there are usually two sides to the audit. There's the town audit where they go through all the books and everything that are in your accounting and treasury and what have you. But then there is a single audit act requirement, which in our case is being done by the same company, and it is it is specifically geared to the school, and it has to be done when because of the grants that they take in from both the state and federal government, and then it's a deeper analysis of those grants, and the same company here, Robert Brown Associates, does it. But it's not required. You could have another company do the school side, but in most places that I've been, it's usually the same company doing both, because they have the background. It's all interconnected in the end.
Thank you.
Okay, George, looks like no further questions, so we can move to finance.
Okay, very good. I'm sorry this is bounced. I'm using a cell phone here, so if I'm rattling all over the place, excuse my hand. I'm holding the phone in one hand and using the book in another. But essentially, the finance department, I preface this each time that we do it. Here in Foxborough, you have accumulated all your financial entities and put them under sort of one roof. But I stress each time that that I give this information and in different venues, that the finance department is made up of three, and I'm going to say four separate entities. You have your town accountant's office, okay, you have your treasury, and in this case, there's usually a collector, okay. In many cases, it's the town treasurer collector, which that's the way it's set up in Foxborough. But the collector can be a separate entity as you go into another town. You have your board of assessors, which would comprise your fourth major distinct department. So in saying this, each one of those entities is governed by a set of state statutes. Each of them has a certain duty that they have to perform that usually goes above and beyond what the town's policies are. The town accountant has certain regulations. If you go into chapter 44, you can read for hours on things that the town accountant has to do. The treasurer has certain laws that they have to go by. So there are four distinct offices here, and by the way, there is an IT portion of this budget as well. So if you look and you kind of see that each of the sections, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 done under your salary, which is sort of segregating each one of those positions, and including the finance director. And if you look at the bottom of the salary section, you're looking at a 2.54% increase, while at the same time, if you flip to the next page, you're looking at the expense side of it, again split up into, in this case, it looks like 5 separate sections, coming down to 2.39 for a total budget of 2.5. The salary side, I think, is rather obvious from a standpoint. You can, as you folks have been talking about for the last probably 25 minutes or so, most of it is drawn to salary increases in the way of steps. Okay, COLAs that were already in there in regard to existing contracts that are continuing, and certain wage and personnel schedules that have been voted by the town. The bigger pieces, I think, in your expense line is each section. Like I mean, you'll notice usually the treasurer collector is in charge of your postage and there's certain book bindings that they do and office supplies, et cetera, et cetera. There's the assessors have certain training things and appraisal services that need to be accomplished. You can see that broken out there. The office equipment maintenance and legal services and what have you, that usually falls under the treasurer collector, because legal services would be for tax titles and what have you. And then at the bottom, I think you're going to see that we hold, which is something that we've talked about before, we hold a number of town-wide programs, i.e. I'm going to come right out with the big one, which is the Munis program, which is being used for most or 90% of your financial programming for the town. Even though it's being serviced by our IT department, it's being paid for through the finance department. Another thing that I'll note, like that we've got in that IT budget portion is the new program that you're working with this year, the ClearGov. That's falling there, and again, it's a sort of a town-wide thing. I mean, it's financially driven, but it's there for for a number of different departments to use and boards and committees. So I guess let me say this: it's an overview of what it is. There's about between the 4 or 5 different departments I mentioned. You're looking at about 60 lines between salary and then expense. So I'll just back off for a second and just go to if you've got questions on certain items or procedures or what have you. I mean, you can hear me, right?
Go ahead, but not.
Yeah, no, Mr. Chairman, just to compensate on what George mentioned, kind of the same thing. What we did is that when we all met with us, the liaison team with George and Mary, we tried to understand. I mean, if you look at the relationship, it's, as I call it, 70-30. 70% is salary, 30% is all the other expenses. What's rather peculiar, to George's point, under the other expenses, if you look at actually on page 4 of 223 of our book, the purchase services, as George explained, we looked at them in very detail. A lot of these have to do with what I would call non-traditional finance. It just so happened that they are within the finance department. The point being is that we spent quite a bit of time with George to understand the nature of those purchase services. And as mentioned by George, they are pretty much for the town purposes. And again, other than the salaries, it's stuck here in finance. I mean, they are posted here in finance, but the 70-30% ratio, 30% is all these other expenses. I would say that I think we've all concluded that they are all legitimate, and there was not much more we could add in terms of potential either reduction or. So I don't know if anybody else has any point in that sense.
If I might add something, Bernard, not to cut you off. I hope you weren't going to say something more. I hate these Zoom things. I can't tell when somebody's finished or not.
No. I'm all set. I'm all set, George. Thank you.
But one of the things I think that you've hit on, which I know you're speaking about my department right now, but I think you're going to find that if you're looking at a municipality as a whole, that ratio that you're talking about of 70-30, I'll go even so far as saying 75-25 is sort of the way we're primarily a service-oriented business, if you will, being a municipality. So by far and away, the largest portion of your budget is payroll and those expenses related to payroll, i.e. health insurance and what have you. So it sort of rolls that way through the entire budget. You know, for the most part, I'm playing a little fast and loose with it. I mean, I can't say it's exactly 75-25 or 70-30, but it's someplace in that range.
Yes, my last point on this one is just actually if we look at the footnote on the footnote 11 on the other IT service contract, it's a perfect example. If you look at it, it has to do with financial software for the entire town and the schools. So I go back to what I had mentioned last year. When we look at those budgets, the conclusion will always be the same. Unless there is what I would call, like the corporate world, a true restructure at the top level and the entire budget of 80+ million, everything else will be exactly what is mentioned here. It's either contractual or it's needed, or it's expenses here buried into the finance department for other areas. So again, I know I mentioned that quite a bit last week, so I won't go there again, but that's my overall statement when we look at those budgets.
Any further questions for George on finance? I see none, so thank you, George. The next, I think the next area for you is the advisory committee budget, which is a big one.
Yeah.
And before you go too long, Bernard wants to know what happened to that $95,000 stipend. We were looking for it.
You'll still be looking long and hard for that.
It was there. It was there for a second and gone. Jeez.
Well, do you have an opening? I'll go on the AdCom if you got a $95,000 stipend. I'll come on with you.
Well, Larry, one could argue is that AdCom, if you look at the 2019 actual expenses, which is 12 months, one could argue is that even in the past year, could help contribute roughly $1,000 in free cash every year.
True. That is true. I think we might add more this year to free cash. I think some of the expenses are coming down.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. So, George, you have anything you want to add? It looks pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and remember a portion of your, what I call it an AdCom, you have the expense piece, and then of course towards the bottom of the budget you have your reserve funds, which will be coming up on too, but which falls under your control, but that's used for emergency transfers, and there's an entire procedure that people come before you to move that money with, but it's the same as it was last year.
Yeah. Okay. Brad, did you have a question? I saw you raise your hand earlier. Brad.
Yeah, no, the only reason total transparency, that's the reason I joined AdCom, Larry. You told me there was a certain amount of salary I was going to be picking up, so.
Surprise, Brad.
Thank you for my presentation today.
Well, next year they'll pay you. Okay, moving along. Legal services.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This one is not moving up dramatically either. You can see that our numbers here are pretty. Let me just try and get to that one. Yeah, right, there we go. We didn't increase this at all. We left it exactly where it is. It's been a relatively good year, but you never know when that could change. We're constantly trying to do as much as we can without having to call town council, but we still need to do it because it's a very legally based type of business. So we're constantly, consulting and talking. But the good news is that we're not doing a lot of litigation type of issues. We're trying to resolve some things that make sense, but generally speaking, there's not a lot of litigation in the town right now, and that's a good sign. There was a lot when I first came on, but we've cleaned up a lot of that. So I'm pleased to say that we've been maintaining a pretty good direction in that. So right now, there's no increase, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to take any questions.
Tom?
Just as being proactive, has there been any knowledge of any other communities, municipalities being maybe sought after with legalities due to COVID? Have any other towns?
No, it's still early at this point, Tom. In terms, we have, and this is a chapter that hasn't been written yet. I think, I think there are a lot of different chapters that haven't been written yet on this, but I think right now the answer is no. I mean, we haven't seen a lot of cases or issues. I think the challenge that some of these towns are going to face, though, is getting their employees back to work in the building itself, because I think people have gotten so used to working remotely that they're going to really decide that it's really the best way to go. But yet we're a service-oriented business, so I think we really have to be careful. And that we're somewhat limited in terms of people not being able to being required to come to work, because there are a lot of people, police, fire, DPW, social services. So those are people we have to meet one-on-one with in many cases. So, our office staff has pretty much come back to work for the most part. There's very few exceptions to that. And generally speaking, and those people all want to come back too. It's not like they don't want to. It's just some people have been faced with, with childcare issues, things of that nature, that, when places are closed, they have no place to bring their kids. So, but I think generally speaking, as far as the COVID chapter, as far as the legality issues, we're trying to manage that as best we can. But from all the things that we've done, and so far we've been following all the established guidelines and legal guidelines to keep our employees safe and to do whatever we had to do to keep them, and keep them connected to the town as best we can.
I'll only throw in one thing, Tom. I don't know anything about COVID from where I was, because it all came on after I had left. But I'll say, compared to the town I was in before, was only about 60 to 70% of the budget that Foxborough has. I mean, the whole 80 million, and yet their legal services were up around 270, and sometimes it would spike to 350, and that was kind of like a normal year. So there are very few normal things that are going on here that the legal services are being used for. So it's actually smaller than the smaller town that I was in.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, Bill, just a quick question. I noticed that your labor and special counsel expense has really dropped significantly since 2019, particularly labor counsel. What's the reason for that?
Well, we haven't had any major labor crises, and I'm knocking on the desk of my wood on my desk right now when I say that. And we've been fortunate in that regard. But all it takes is a couple, and it can run that bill up pretty quickly. We still from time to time have to do investigations. We have to do, deal with civil service matters, deal with MCAD questions that come up and issues that and so we try to do that in a very cost-effective way. We're fortunate that we have really good labor counsel. I know Leah speaks very highly of Jamie, who does a really good job for us. Our town council, Pat Costello, does a terrific job for us as well as our town council. And then we have Jack Dolan, who's our HR counsel, and he just helps us with a lot of policies, and he does a lot of investigations for us. Unfortunately, we haven't had to do a lot of those, which is good, but we've also, he's an advisor on a day-to-day basis when we have questions about interpretations of law, that we don't have to go to labor council with those interpretations on a regular basis.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
I don't see any further questions. So I think we're good with legal. And the last item before we move on to Bob Cutler is the GIT system or the IT system. I believe it's you, George.
The GIS?
Yes.
GIS system. Yeah.
Again, that's another it's another program that just like we were talking about before. It has been segregated. That's the one that does the where you can put your credit cards in and pay over the phone. It's the People's GIS, and that one is again. It's another program, if you will, like the others. Why it was segregated. I think they wanted to keep it separate for some reason from the others that all seem to be falling under the finance. I really don't know why, but it was made a separate line, and again, it's another contractual program that we're paying for the services on an annual basis.
I'll just speak generally to this, and because for George's benefit and as well as yours collectively, is that the GIS IT lines were purposely segregated so we could track and see where IT costs are running on a regular basis, because they sometimes get hidden separately in individual departments, and they can often throw those lines off, particularly if the licensing costs go up rather dramatically. They can actually artificially raise the lines of individual budgets. We'd rather keep an eye on this individual, and by the way, it provides us some flexibility in that budget as well. In the event that we need to fix something or replace something, we have the ability to, because the budget dollars, generally speaking, are earmarked for identifiable expenses, but it does give us some level of flexibility to keep all the money in one place as opposed to in individual budgets.
Well, I was referring, Bill, more to the idea. I don't know why it's like a line where we have all the other ones under the IT, under finance, why it's segregated there, where I guess it doesn't make any difference, but it's, goes from there.
Yeah, I was referring to the GIS IT system, IT lines.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, so then the IT service contracts that went from 5,000 to 33,000 last year and now for 41, was that combined from other departments into one place, or was there a large contract or a large upgrade that we needed to do to bring things up to speed? Is that going to keep going on that same level, or is that a one-time deal?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. Last year we took, as Bill said, we combined from other departments. Some of it was residing in the inspectional or the building inspector's office. Some of it was in another. And as Bill said, they combined it all into one line, which emptied that large jump because all these other lines went down by whatever the corresponding amount was. And now you're seeing an increase from 39 to 42, which is probably just your standard amount for the increase that would be there.
Well, the one unusual expense there was that we acquired a communication tool that's used through our voice over IP system called Rainbow that allows us to do internal conferencing, things of that nature. So we do. Like, for instance, this morning I had my department head meeting, and it's all done through Rainbow as opposed to Zoom. So we're actually connecting throughout our entire system with, and even remotely for that matter, with individuals using that system. So it's a new system that we're using and recommended to us by IT because it was actually it was a more cost-effective method of doing it than using individual Zoom accounts every time. But also because of the fact that we can do that. It actually controls every one of the phones, and it actually allows us to do. So if a call comes into our office now, it gets connected right to our cell phones, and we have all the remote capabilities. So if anybody's out of the office for a day, you can still get the calls into our cell phones. So
or if you go to lunch or something too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've been known to call people at all times of the day and even night. and ask them, hey, what do you think about this? And what's great, if I call them any time of the day, it gets connected right to their cell phone, so I'm able to connect with them at any time.
Can't hide from you anymore.
Yeah, it's
So,
Big
Bill-
Brother. Unfortunately, it's Big Brother if you ever ask me.
Bill, I just have a quick question. I just want to make sure. So we're paying for all the softwares and all the applications the town is using,
Yes,
right?
For the most part.
Yes.
Larry, there's a few lines, as George points out, in the finance lines, a few IT lines, but by and large, this is mostly the software expenses that we're using for the town in this line.
Okay. Leah, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, just one quick clarification. Going back to what you said earlier, Bill, you talked about that $5,000, or now it's $4,000 in office equipment maintenance for being that HR software.
Mhm.
Just help me understand how that works, because that was always budgeted in. I'm making up numbers, but like, let's say it was 4,000 and went to 7,000, so we didn't renew it. That was already in the budget. And you just mentioned it was part of the town manager's office because that's where HR sits. But now the first bullet point for the budget highlight says it's the HR onboarding software. So, where that is not a new software and it's kind of living in both places, I'm just trying to understand.
It's being split between the two budgets.
It's split?
Yes.
Okay.
The goal is to one day just combine everything into one budget, all the townwide IT programs. So we're just doing that little by little. Eventually you'll see Munis and anything else that's used townwide be all in one centralized budget.
And Marie, that could be like, just, as you're thinking about it, like board docs or whatever we end up could end up, in that as well.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, it's we're actually in the point now where we're trying to pick those things and put them into one area so we can have the greatest way of managing as well as flexibility as well.
Okay. Any further questions for George or Bill? Okay, if not, George and Bill, I'm gonna ask that you guys take a 5 minute break so we can move on to Bob Cutler. So if that's okay with you, it's more efficient. It's all on the same page and we'll just move along. So Bob Cutler, if you're ready, it's all yours.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Hope you're managing the winter okay. So my budgets are pretty simple. I have one for the town clerk's office and one for the election and registration section of my office. In both cases, the expense budgets are flatlined, so there's no increases to discuss on those. So really, it's just the salary increases, which for both my assistant town clerk and my administrative assistant, they're just at the 2%. Mine is at the 4% because mine's voted at town meeting and has to be set at this time of year. And all of the numbers have been calculated by Marie in the accounting office. So those numbers were factored in by her. So it's pretty straightforward on both ends. I do have a request in for a CIP item for new election equipment, which in discussions with Bill, I think the CIP, at least the vast majority of it, will be done in a fall town meeting. So that probably won't be addressed this spring. But basically that's the sum and substance of my budget.
It looks pretty straightforward. Sharon, do you have anything you want to ask? Sharon?
Sorry, I can't find my unmute. No, I don't have any questions for Bob. We took care of everything that we had any questions on, so it's pretty straightforward.
Okay. Any further questions for Bob? No. Hey, Bob, I just have a quick question on the voting machines that you need to replace whenever that's approved. Will the state issue will the state pay for it?
No, the state will not pay for it. there are two vendors, so your only choice is to go with either one of those. They haven't approved any others. Both of the machines are fairly similar and the cost is fairly similar. So it just comes down to a comfort level on which one you like working with over the other one. So no, unfortunately, the state will not pay for that.
Okay, fair enough. Let me see. Any further questions? Tom?
Yeah, Bob, what pest control services are you providing other than what would be the municipal buildings people doing?
So that's really animal control more. It's got to do with dog tags and things like that. So,
okay.
Yeah, it's not really pest control, but it's animal.
You're not buying a gross of mouse traps.
No, no, I haven't seen any mice around here yet, but.
Okay. So that's okay. Dog tags. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's animal control related.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Any further questions for Bob? Hearing none. Bob, thank you for coming. Sorry to let you wait a few minutes, but
that's all right. Have a good night.
You too. All right, George and Bill, we're back to you for your debt service.
Well, I'll say this: the debt service is usually derived. We receive a series of. Like last year, we did a bond issuance, and what the debt service consists of is the annual payments on those bond issuances. So very much, and I know if I'm speaking down, it's not because I don't think you guys know, but if somebody's listening at home, the bond payments are very similar to if you went out and took a loan on your home. There's a monthly payment that you're going to make on your mortgage. Well, we're making a biannual payment on bond issuances that we have done in the past for such things like fixing buildings like the school, building the new town hall, and primarily large buildings, and in some cases piping and water related items, which are all big ticket items. You'll note that it dropped by 2% this year, or the price, because as you move along, you're paying off these various, you're paying down the interest. Obviously, we have sort of a flat line, straight as you go form of payment. And as the years progress, certain things fall off that were there. You might have done something 20 years ago and it finished off last year, so it's down slightly, and that's inclusive of the fact that you folks had done both the school project last year, which I'm still astounded that it was done the way it was. I'm impressed actually that it was done without use of a override or a debt exclusion override. It was done pretty much all internally and absorbed into the budget, and still was paid for with what we had on hand, even during the COVID crisis. So I guess that kind of sums it up. It's pretty much a straightforward piece every year. There's not much you can change on it, other than it's either going to go up or down depending on if we go out to bond again.
Bernard, do you have any questions?
No, pretty straight.
No? Okay, it's pretty good. Tom, do you have a question?
Yeah, usually we would get a 20-year out generated form of debt that's on the books and expiration dates and that kind of stuff. Is that something that can be generated and made available? I just look here, I didn't see it unless I'm missing the page.
We actually have it. Yes, we can shoot it over to Larry tomorrow.
Sure,
that'd be great.
And just a point, I will say one thing on that point, Tom, is that we're going to see a little bit of a dip in 2025, 24, 25, because some stuff is dropping off. And so we're going to see that our debt service we're going to be done, I think, with the middle school, if I'm not mistaken, by the 24, 25 year, which puts us in a position to start looking at other projects, which is now the time that we should be having those conversations. We're going to do some trying to keep the debt service flat. And I think, the smart way to deal with this is to maintain your debt service at a flat ratio. So but you at the same time, you're maintaining your facilities on a regular basis. So many times there are communities that will say, well, we'll just drop off and then we won't pay anything for anything new. That turns out to be a very expensive mistake that towns fall into. It's a trap that you fall into because you see the opening and then you say, oh, okay, this is going to be a great thing. The good news is that we haven't done a lot of borrowing outside the levy. And I think that's really kept the town in a really good position going forward, so that now when we go to look for another project, we're going to be in a position where we can actually continue to do stuff, hopefully within the levy and not have to borrow outside of the levy. So I do think that the other thing that to think about too is that you'll see, and I don't know if we have the chart to show this too, but the pension system will be paid off in 2028, if I'm not mistaken. So I do think that that's something that we should really think about. 2028 will be a really good year to look at that. So I also think that when that happens, you'll be in a better position to start paying off the OPEB liability as well, which is supposed to be in 2032, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Accelerate it or something.
So you could accelerate that, so that you could probably get the whole thing paid off within the next 9 years, which would be extraordinary. Anyway, so I think that's, that puts us in a much better position to start looking at facilities. And by then you'll be in a position where you have to maybe do some upgrades in a few places. But generally speaking, our facilities, because we have a central maintenance operation now, we are in a much better position to keep our facilities running smoothly. Tony's, we didn't get into it too much with Tony tonight earlier, but he does a really good job at his team keeping our buildings in really good working order. And something breaks, he fixes it. It doesn't stay broken for 6 months. They fix it right away. And not only that, but they maintain the systems the way they should be maintained. A lot of places don't do that. So it gets very expensive quick if you don't do that. So it's a very proactive group. And not only that, but they respect the buildings that we have. If you look around Town Hall, and we've been in that building, believe it or not, we went into our 4th year of being in that building. It still looks like it was brand new. And that's a reason why I wanted to do that. And we wanted to make sure that people know that we respect the investment that we've made in it. And so we'll continue to, that's true probably of any building in the town. They're all maintained on really well, really good position, really good basis.
Okay. I just like that long range perspective to see when things would drop off. The borough school isn't even open yet, and we got people are probably lining up as our project's been on a push back for this until the time is right. And if they see other things dropping off, then there's the opportunity to maybe start planning for that drop off. And
it's good, Tommy, because I think there's always people looking for new projects, but by the same token, what you don't want to do is create huge swings and valleys in terms of your debt schedule, because that creates a very unstable budgeting scenario for you. So what we're suggesting is that, and this is what our advisors, our financial advisors, tell us to do, is to start planning for your improvements. So when the dips come, you can actually reborrow, reinvest back into your facilities, and use that money consistently for improvements to your community facilities.
Okay, Bill, looks like we're good with that. The next section is pension.
So on the pension side, the number you see in the budget is the number we got directly from the Norfolk County Pension Board. They haven't officially given us this, but what we got from them was their actuaries report, which showed this information to us, and the director actually emailed me a link to it, so we were able to get it sooner than most places got it, which was good. but we actually saw that number. And the good news about that is that, as you recall, some of you veteran members of the committee, that number's gone up to historically around 10% a year. And this year was up around half of that, about 5.5. So that's a good year. And I think that's more of a reflection of the investment environment that we've been in.
Yeah,
we've got a really good return on the investments. And as a result, that's helped us keep our costs down a little bit. Let's hope the same thing holds true for the next few years, but it's anybody's guess at that. And if I could predict that one, I wouldn't be working here. I can tell you that.
Any questions on pensions?
No, sorry. I just leapt right in there, Larry. I did want to throw in a caveat. So this is the Norfolk County pension we're talking about, right, Bill?
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah.
So 2026 so it's pretty badly underfunded right now. We're well ahead of a bunch of the other communities on this. That's true as well.
Well, there's two. Just let me be clear about that, Paul, because the pension system is a county-wide system. So the system we're scheduled to be fully funded in that pension system by 28, 29, as I recall. Okay. Yep. It's the OPEB liability that people are not paying down, which we are.
Yep.
And so our liability there is down, and we conceivably could pay that off by 2032. But I do think it's going to be closer to 2030, 31, because we'll be able to shift the money from the pension system into that.
Right. Where I was headed is you want to be, so the Norfolk County pension's about 63% funded. So it's pretty far behind, but we've been in a good position as a municipality. The only point I want to make is pension funds sometimes underestimate their liability. In fact, more often than not, they do. So we want to be a little careful talking about specific years when things are going to be free and clear, because there have been a lot of, particularly for municipalities, again, surprises in the past. So I just wanted to point that out.
No, that's a fair point. So just so you know, that every 2 years they actually do an actuarial analysis of that, and that's where the estimate that's coming to us now is from the most recent actuarial analysis. Okay.
And just so I'm clear, every municipality whose pension fund is at trouble had an actuary as well. And I'm not saying anything about Norfolk in particular. In fact, I'm guessing, having read through the analysis, it's in an okay place, but things drift, particularly if returns go bad. So I just wanted to be a little careful putting years out there. And then while I've got this, OPEB appears somewhere else in the budget as a line item, right?
Yes. Right. Yeah, and we're not funding it this year because it would be a separate line just for that, because that money is not coming into us as we normally would expect it to receive it. So I do think we could see a recovery of that in 2022, but I'm not budgeting for that in recovery. We can always go back and revisit that if we can, if the situation turns around and improves. Just like I said, that with this current fiscal year, we can always put some money into it if we want to. But I do think I'd be more tempted, to do something like that at a fall town meeting after we close out the fiscal year and know where we stand with that.
And just so for newer members, including me, a lot of the receipts, the activity receipts, the tax receipts would have gone to OPEB, so like restaurant tax and so on.
That's correct. Yeah, it's
okay.
meals and hotel tax that we set aside for that.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Yeah.
We are one of, let's say, 20 towns, I'm not sure how many, in a larger pot of the pension. What is the risk when we are, let us say, 100% funded and 10 of the other towns are failing to meet their commitments, and therefore the total fund is struggling to meet its pension liabilities? Do we have a risk there?
Well, it's an interesting question, because my understanding is that they're obligated to pay that pension as a member. They're obligated to make that pension payment. It'd be where you see problems with that, Jack, are those cities and towns. Actually, it's a few towns, but mostly cities that have redirected those funds to other issues and have not met their obligation. As a result, they put themselves in a really difficult bind with their pension systems. That's not the case with Norfolk County, because it's a county-run system, and they have a very strict limitation on people. And if you don't pay it, it becomes a big problem for them, because they will address it but I don't know of anybody who's not paid, to put it that way. And I haven't seen anybody not make that obligation. So it's a fair question, but I haven't seen it happen yet. And I don't anticipate seeing it happening over the next several years. I mean, it could happen conceivably in 10 years or 15 years from now, but I don't see it happening in the near future.
So you're saying for our particular mix in Norfolk County, the risk is minimal, but
that's right.
That may not be true always.
That's exactly right. And I can't say that, it's going to be true forever, but you're absolutely right.
I'm going to say, Jack, we live in a commonwealth, remember?
That's right.
Our wealth becomes part of the common good if other people can't meet their obligations. But I think
remember, common sense isn't common. Remember that.
I think Dennis had his hand up there for a minute too.
Okay, Dennis.
Just quick thing, Bill. In the budget book, your budget highlights say that the pension's going up 8%. That number should be 5.5%.
That's right. Yeah, that was we did that early on, and then we got the number later. So before we made that adjustment, we'll correct that.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. I guess we're done with pensions. So unemployment compensation.
This has been an interesting year for this. Mike Johns actually manages this particular line, but it's been an interesting year for unemployment compensation because we ran into, we're not looking to increase it other than the standard 2.5% for this year because we believe that wages will go up that amount, 2 to 2.5%. So we want to be in that range. But generally speaking, we had some claims, but a lot of the claims that we had were reimbursed to us by the feds. And so we were able to offset some of those costs, but it still remains to be seen if we take a real impact. But we've only on the town side of government, we've only laid off one employee that I know of. There's been some in the school side, and the one person in the town side was on the recreation side because there are no programs. So and that money gets paid out by the revolving fund itself, and there was no money to pay that person. So that person did file for unemployment, and they made their claim. But there's been a fair amount of claims of fraudulent claims. But we track that very closely. We have an outside company that works with us that tracks that for us. And anytime we see a claim, both the school and the town track this very closely. Mike and the school folks, Leah's not Leah's, but Jimmy. Jimmy, the last, what's Jimmy's last name, George?
Jimmy.
In the school department. Yeah. I'm just trying to.
McGovern?
Yeah, Jim McGovern. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Jim McGowan. He tracks that closely in the school side. I was trying to think of Stephanie McGowan. What he tracks it very closely with Mike, and they talk a lot about claims if they come in. We haven't had to see a lot of claims lately, but there was a little bit of a flurry there, and most of them were fraudulent. They weren't real claims, so we were able to flag those right away and get those off our books.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Bill, I think we're good with unemployment. Group insurance.
So group insurance, so some good news to report on this front. It's not reflected here in the budget. We were looking at a 3% increase, but it looks like we're going to be seeing about a 2.6% increase. I just got that information last week and late last week. And so our advisor has indicated to us that we're looking at a 2.6% increase. And more importantly, what we're looking at this past year, we're going to see some money come back in that budget as well, because that will flow probably right into free cash for two reasons. We had a 2-week holiday. It was actually one pay period holiday, payment holiday to our employees and to the town because our insurance program through Maya actually had a surplus because there's been a lot of people not filing for standard medical procedures. They've had a lot of procedures, of course, through COVID and other different things associated with the disease, but not necessarily through your elective procedures, which has actually driven the cost of insurance down a little bit. We think it's artificial, but so that's the reason why we're not looking to drive these numbers down permanently. The other good news is that we had a 2-week window. We had a 2-week holiday in September. We've just been advised that they are looking to do a full month holiday in possibly either June or July. And I'm actually contemplating taking it in June. The reason being is that if we do that, it can go right into free cash and actually bolster our free cash for the next fiscal year. So I think it's a better position for us to take. And as a result of that, it'll drive the number down for the budget for this current fiscal year. But we want to maintain the same level of money in the budget and just increase it by 2.6%. So we'll be looking to reduce that number for you in a revision to the budget based upon that latest information. Okay. Any questions on that?
No, Bill, I think we're good.
Okay.
Risk management.
All right, risk management. The news on this one was extraordinarily good. We were. I got an increase. I got information about 2 weeks ago that our risk management program, which was scheduled to be funded at $1.32 million, with a 2.5% increase in fiscal 22. The actual number is going to come in at $800,000, almost $800,000 even. And the reason is because our workers' comp numbers went down rather extraordinarily. And Dennis probably knows this from the insurance industry, but that there's a risk factor that gets applied to some of your claims and workers' comp, which can actually drive up that an ARAP, what is known as an ARAP, gets added to that number, and it can drive up that number rather extensively. Our experience over the past several years has gone down rather dramatically to the point where those numbers came down and helped us on that front. So we're looking at taking that number down about $232,000 going into next fiscal year as well. All right, so that's good news. So right there, you're close to about $300,000 in savings based upon those last two budgets. Anybody have any questions about that?
Bernard.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Bernard.
No, so this is good. So just at the big picture level, so this $300,000 saving, would you say that it's fair that basically from a revenue standpoint, we won't have to basically stretch somewhere in the revenue to that same tune of the 300 to have a balanced budget? Is that a fair statement?
Well, yes. What it means essentially, Bernard, and we've talked about this as well, and I want to talk to you all about this, is that we think if we're gonna save money, well, the first area that we want to save is against the free cash use against the budget. So in other words, I think we're like 1.3 million this year, so we could take that down to about 1 million, and who knows what could happen if we get federal aid, if that could help, and at least maybe help us with some of our capital needs.
Yes.
But I do think that, but there are some other lines that we're still waiting on, and at least one in particular being the Southeast Regional School, to see if in fact we, if that number comes in under what we've projected to be about 7.5%, we could actually have some additional money to add to that number as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So, anything else you want to add to that, George? I don't know if there's anything.
No, I think we could. I think that's the biggest concern everybody has is your free cash, and whatever we can cobble together from these savings and everything else, that would be probably the logical place to go and try to lower that and not use as much of it.
The other good news, when it goes to I'm sorry, I'll go right to Dennis. You already hand up. I'm sorry. Dennis.
I was just going to comment. I think that the term you were searching for is the experience mod.
That's right, thank you.
went
Yeah, that's
down,
right.
and risk management, which just for everyone on the call, suggests that you have a really strong workers' compensation program, injury management program. People aren't tending to get injured on the job, and if they get injured, they come back right away.
Yeah,
that's right.
So that's the only way that number goes down, and it's real savings.
That's right. That's real money, as you can see. Thank you, Dennis, for clarifying that. So the other piece of good information is that when they said that we would take the savings from the health insurance, that's real dollars too, because if you take a month worth of savings in health insurance dollars, that can go. The employees get benefited by that as well as the town. So the employees don't have to pay for the whole month of, say, June, and the town doesn't have to pay for the whole month of June, which means that will free up a certain amount of money that we can have available that will go right into free cash for next fiscal year. So even though we may be we're using more free cash than we normally do for a difficult year, and that, by the way, that's what it's there for, to use for those kind of situations. The reason why it's a good news is because it automatically will help re-energize that fund going into next fiscal year. So I think we're in a better position to do that.
Yes.
Any questions from the committee?
No, I think we're good. Reserve fund. You can suspend 30 seconds.
Yeah, we this is the same amount we've had for the past 7 years that I've been here, I think, is $75,000. And we try not to spend it if we can help it. But at the end of the year, there are things that always come up and, that are unanticipated. But this is for extraordinary unforeseen circumstances. And usually it comes up at the end of the year that we look at this. I don't think I've seen any situation where we've come before the board mid-year with a need for that. But some examples of that might be if we have a boiler go or something breaks unexpectedly that's not insured, we would hit the reserve fund for that. But we typically don't use a lot of that unless at the end of the fiscal year we see some overruns in certain lines that we couldn't anticipate and handle throughout the course of the fiscal year. So right now we don't know of any reasons for us to be concerned about using that money, but anything could happen in the next 4 months. So we're hoping that that won't be the case.
Okay, thank you. Salary reserve fund.
That's basically what we had talked about 2 weeks ago, where instead of going to a special town meeting, we are in fact putting the money aside for when these contracts are in fact certified and by the meeting, and then from there you'll make the move from that account to the various accounts that it's going to filter, or filter into. So I mean, again, it's I think that the benefit of doing it, which we discussed a couple weeks back, is you're putting the money in the bottom line of the budget, even if it isn't going to the direct line it's supposed to. So at least the budget is 99% reflective of what's going on and not down by a certain amount of money and then suddenly spiking after the fact, after the town meeting is over.
So there's another important aspect of this too, is that every year when we actually fix the budget lines, we typically would use free cash to do that.
Yes.
So we would not have to do that in this case if we actually apply the money here. And so this is really nothing more than a budget tool. It's not a slush fund or any or money that's free for all. This is money that's anticipated that the town will need to actually fulfill the full obligation of the budget. And I do think that it's actually an ingenious way of doing it. I think it's a much cleaner way. I think the entire committee will appreciate this as we go into the next fiscal years beyond this, because it will be a lot cleaner way to deal with the budget situations going forward.
I agree.
Agree. Jack?
It is certainly a much cleaner accounting way to do things.
Yes.
It also effectively diminishes a little bit more the power of town meeting. Right now, when you go and you sign a police contract, for example, or fire contract or whatever, to get the money, you have to go to town meeting. The town meeting can't change anything, but it can reject it and therefore force the town to go back and renegotiate, perhaps successfully, perhaps not. But by doing it this way, you have reduced the power of the voters at town meeting another 1%.
Well, let me just suggest to you, Jack, that I don't know if I agree with that, and I'll tell you why. It's because even if we put the money there, it doesn't mean we have to spend it. So, in other words, if the money doesn't get spent, it gets returned back to free cash at the end of the year. And why this is a cleaner way of doing this? Situations occur throughout the entire year where you have, I mentioned earlier, you have people that retire, the people that leave, people that may get terminated for whatever case may be. And as a result, that there is a difference in the wages that could actually go into can be reflected here, as opposed to putting the money instead of artificially putting the money in the budget for the full year. So you can actually leave and just transfer the money from this account into that as needed. So anything that doesn't get spent goes right back to town meeting, right back to town meeting's hands.
I don't question that it's a cleaner way to do it. What I am saying is that right now, if the voters are outraged at some contract, they can vote to not fund it, this different accounting mechanism eliminates them from doing it. Not that it's done very often. I don't even know. I don't recall the last time it was done.
No. So you would still have that ability to do that.
Yes.
So you would still have the ability to do that, Jack, because if town meeting still acts on those individual contracts, and if the individual contract doesn't get funded, if we say we don't fund it, what it means effectively is that we can't spend the money that's in the reserve account against that account. So right. Town meeting still retains the authority over the contract. That's just, I just want to be clear about that. There is no reduction of authority of town meeting in terms of funding or not funding a contract. If the money simply doesn't get funded, if the contract gets disapproved, the money can't get spent on that contract by virtue of the fact that town meeting has given the authority to do that. Right. Do you follow me on that? Do you follow me?
I hear you.
Okay.
But that's the reason I'm asking the questions, because it's not obvious to me that this doesn't reduce the authority of town meeting another 1%. And the reality is town meeting can only act on a very broad set of questions anyway. They can't get into the minutiae, nor should they.
Well, and I do think though that your point's well taken, that that our goal is not to reduce the authority of town meeting. And I, contrary to, some people have that belief that we're trying to do that. The reality is that we are trying to, this is only a tool, a mechanism that makes the budget more clear to people throughout the course of the fiscal year. What has happened in the past is that it's gotten murky because, these monies were then transferred into different accounts and et cetera. And that's really not the cleanest way of presenting a budget. This is a much cleaner way of doing it. So I think, but again, it goes back to the fact that town meeting ultimately retains the authority to approve a contract in terms of funding the contract. And that authority rests with that body, and that in no way diminishes that role of authority in this instance.
Okay. It's simply bypassing the having to go to a special town meeting, move the money in after the fact,
right,
and in some ways skew the budget that you put out in at the annual.
Exactly.
Hey George, I have a question. Does this line item shows up at a town meeting, so someone could hold and then we vote on it, or is this number buried somewhere in a bigger number?
No, it's a line like all the other lines. So like if any line, somebody could say, I don't want you to put that much in.
Yeah, I know. The reason I'm asking is that, Jack, so if someone's uncomfortable and they want to stop it, they could also hold the line and then put a lot of discussion. And that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah,
Right.
we just want to be clear. We want everybody to make sure they understand what they're voting on. So and that's the purpose of these meetings, is to make sure people are aware of that. There's no smoke and mirrors here. This is it's a very good budgeting tool and mechanism that makes the budget much more predictable.
It is, Bill. I agree. Jack, are you good?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
And I agree that it's a much cleaner way to do it. There's no issue there. I just want to anticipate the questions at town meeting that, for example, well, you're removing our authority to control the budget, a particular budget or a particular contract, and that needs to be hashed out beforehand, or else it'll take a good part of town meeting night.
No, so it's a fair point, Jack. So just remember that each contract it still has its own article. So at the end of the day, that individual article will still have to be approved or disapproved by town meeting. Fair enough? Okay.
Fair enough, yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. State and county assessment.
Those state and county assessments Maria's put on there.
Yeah.
They come out, actually, they're off of your cherry sheet. Okay. By the way, just for clarification, why is it called the cherry sheet? Because it used to come in on a piece of pink paper. Now it comes in automatically, but the pink side was the bad side. That's where you get charged. The front page was the green piece of paper was the money that was coming in. So every year we get hit with these charges, which we really don't. They're deducted before they even come in, and it's there, and that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't even see it.
Right.
Yeah, and I know, Josh. Just a high level, so that some of the new members understand what they're looking at. That's all. Hey,
Yeah,
I do have a question. The Norfolk Aggie assessment is built in this. It gets deducted before the money even gets to the town.
Yeah,
Norfolk Aggie. Yeah.
Yeah, we receive a bill. It usually comes through the school, but it is charged to that cherry sheet account, which is Norfolk. I'm trying to think of the it's called Norfolk Assessments, County Assessments. There's a couple of things that come out of there. I guess at one point the county had gone bankrupt, and there was some bond issuances out there. They're charging us that, and then that Norfolk Aggie comes out of there as well.
Hey, I noticed we budgeted a flat amount for charter school. Is there a reason for it?
Well, what happens is, as the cherry sheet, we don't know for sure what we're going to get for the cherry sheet. So we're assuming right now, over the last couple of years, the cherry sheet has come in relatively flat. Okay. And what will happen is as time goes on, or as the months go by, unfortunately, I mean, I'd like to say that we didn't even get those numbers are supposed to be for us sometime like in April or May by law. Last year, we didn't even get them until I think it was October or November of the fiscal year. So most of the time on a normal year without the COVID, they're always late and they're always pushing like June. All right. So we try to go along and just keep adjusting them as each incarnation of the budget comes out. First the governors, then the House 1, then House 2, and you try to get it as tight. But right now, with everything, we just came out and did it flat, because it's going to be relatively flat anyway on both sides, the incoming and the outgoing. But
fair enough, George. Fair enough.
All right.
Any questions? If not, we'll move to overlay. Real quick.
Okay, overlay is provision for abatement and exemption. Every year we set aside a certain amount of money that comes off the top of the budget in the event of, well, if you didn't get paid or somebody put in for an abatement. We've been putting in historically about 1.1 million every year, which is essentially being taken off of your ability to spend on the budget.
Yeah.
And the only time you can release it is once you have spent up to, or once you have taken in the money up to that point. So if I had $1 million overlay and I was supposed to be collecting $10 million, I have to get up to the point where I have got 9 million, and then I can begin releasing it as we go along. So it is something that we put in every year, and it's really coming off the top of your budget, so you can't spend it. And it's like if you were in a business and we were selling TVs, honestly, you're probably not. Somebody's going to stiff you. Okay, you might have sold 10,000 TVs, and somebody's not going to pay the bill. So if you go out and budget like every amount that we're going to sell is there, you run the danger of overspending. So if you leave a reserve, which this is what it is, overlay reserve, you're taking what you think you're going to get in off the top. And then if somebody comes in, which is legitimate and does an abatement, then we're not spending that money and then finding out we didn't have it after the fact.
Okay. All right. Any questions? Anyone? No. I guess the last item is snow and ice, and I think we all had enough. So you can give us a 30-second spiel on people that's new to the committee.
Well, this is the only account that you can legally overexpend. I was telling this to you guys last week with Bernard and Paul and Dan. I think there's a misunderstanding that, you give me 100,000 on something and I can just spend 105. It can't be done because it's illegal. The only account that can be overexpended by law is the snow and ice account. So each year you put in the exact same amount that you put the year before, and then we kind of predict, because you're raising it on the next year's budget rather than going back to 100 different little town meetings to try to keep up with it. This year I set it for 288, which was a culmination of the last 8 or 9 years of overages. Okay. Right now, I think we're running at about $140,000, negative. Okay. So we still got plenty of room. Of course, there's a big snowstorm coming in on Friday just to screw that thing up. So, but there's, hopefully if we don't use the whole 288, then that'll be another spot that we can put money back into the budget and lower your free cash with.
George, can I make a comment? This was explained to me years ago that we intentionally, you want to really underfund it, because if there's a huge disaster or whatever you call it, like the year we had 120 inches of snow, that's when the federal yes. might kick some money to the state. So the more you fund, the less money you get back. So wouldn't it make more sense to just keep it at 215?
Well, I think what you're missing is we're not talking about getting money back from the federal government or any other place, okay? What they're telling you is this: in a normal year, what would have happened prior to this law change is we put so much money in. So we're trying to predict a year out, what is it going to have? We're going to have a lot of snow or not. So what would happen is you might come in and put a huge amount of money into the snow and ice account, and then there's no snow at all, and you've tied all that money up to put it on someplace else. Or vice versa, you might not have put in enough, and then you got to run back to a town meeting, and then it snows again, and you got to go to another town meeting. So what they're telling you is, stay with what you put in on the base year. Well, okay, I'm saying 100 because I'm not looking at it at the moment. Keep that amount, okay? And then what we're going to allow you to do is, once the smoke is all cleared, if you've gone over by 150 to 200,000 or whatever it is, you're actually raising it on the next budget and saying, I have to raise this, okay? So rather than sitting there guessing, by April or May, this is what we had for the winter. So you're really putting it on next year's budget, okay, which is the 20 years. So technically they don't want you to move it, because then what you're doing is you're skewing your own number. You wouldn't be able to tell how much the overage was every year. You're back to trying to guess again.
I understand, George. I guess my question is, if we have too much money in there, and then a year from now, there's a huge major snow, whatever, we end up with 200 inches of snow. That's when potentially some money could be coming from the federal government. It should. Right. And then when that happens, don't they look at some kind of formula, how much you set aside versus how much you overspend? So the more you overspend, the more restitution you get back from the state or federal government.
There's another, George, let me just interject here, because I think I understand what Larry's saying here.
Yeah.
The issue is, you don't want to overfund that account, because once you put whatever amount you put into that account, you have to budget for every year after that. Right? You're required to. You're obligated to by statute. So you have to be really careful that you don't put a too high of a number there for that reason, because you could have a year where you don't have any snow and you put all that money in there, and then you just have to wait for it to flow to free cash. But you're creating a situation is that what we take a look at is what's the standard reasonable cost for a storm over several years to see where we are, and generally speaking that we're at that point now. We did bump it up a few years ago because we were seeing that number start to creep a little bit in terms of average cost. So that's why we put it at the number that we're at now, Larry. But and last year, recall, we didn't have a very strong winter, so we had a very we didn't cost us a lot of money in that account. This year, we're seeing a flurry of storms in February. Hopefully, March will be better and will be kinder to us. But I do think the concern is that we don't want to over budget that line, because once we do, we have to pay for it every single year.
Correct.
Right.
You're required to. Okay.
Okay. Good enough. Thank you. I don't see any questions, George.
All right.
I think we're good. I think, unless I miss anything, I think we went through all the accounts we're supposed to.
I can't think of. I mean, if you missed one, I'm. It's so subtle that I can't even think of what it is. But I think you got them all.
All right. Let's couch it. Let's say we went through 99% of it, but not.
Yeah, just in case. Right, just in case.
But not.
No, Larry, if I may just offer a general comment to all outcome members. I know that Bill offered quite a bit of thoughts in terms of the entire, call it salary and wages and how we're going to have to benchmark going forward. What I did actually the past 3 years, and you guys, all of you, part of the outcome, you may find that also somewhat useful. I went to the past 3 years annual report from the town, 17, 18, 19. And just, over weekends, what I did is that I looked at basically toward the last pages. There is an appendix with basically everyone's who's a public employee in town, their wages, overtime, what's paid by third party, and what I would call total gross.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found interesting is that here we tend to, again, sometimes emphasize over, let's call it 2 or 3 or 4 specific individuals, to be honest. I was actually pretty surprised that when you account for this overtime and let's call it third party pay, the total package compared to what someone, let's say, like we're talking about Mike, what he does compared to others. My point is that this is not comparing a fair benchmark, but the past 3 years, if you go through those 3 line items, again, wages, overtime, and third-party pay, and the total gross, you'll be surprised to see that Mike is not even up there compared to many others. Now, perception being reality at times, many of those are folks we probably would not even want to ask because of the departments they are in. My point is that just within the town, you'll be surprised to see what I would call, like we do in the corporate world, total package, not just the salary line item. The other things also I would mention is for a lot of us who either we have our own businesses or we work for the corporate world, it's a very tough thing to compare. Why? Because in many companies, you may have employees at the top level who really their compensation in terms of salary are actually half than what our town manager makes. But if you look at their stock option and grants and other package benefits, it's just 20 times more. The point, I would invite all of us sometime to really have what I would call, yes, it's to have other comparison, but within those town annual reports, you will be surprised, again, looking at all these line items where, I know we were talking about Mike before, but he's below compared to many others. I don't know what everybody's names and what they do, but I just would like to express some carefulness in terms of also other towns. We know, for example, even at the federal level, because it's all public info, how much even our president makes. But again, they have other big perks, like, you know, so my point is that when we look at 1 or 2, 3 people, I think it would be only fair to go back to the, again, I'm specific, 17, 18, 19 annual report and looking at some of these numbers, and you'll see where some of the folks where you have questions are, where they compare to. This is just, again, food for thoughts.
Thank you. I think we're done with all the department budgets. So tonight, before you sign off, Bill, if it's okay, I would like you to bring the committee up to speed on the MS4 and the sale of the sewer capacity.
So the MS4 and the sewer capacity issue is really two different things. So the sewer capacity is well, the sale of sewer capacity is one in which the town of Sharon, there's a development at the border of Sharon that's looking to purchase capacity out of Foxborough system. And strangely enough, that the direction in which that the capacity came from came from Sharon to begin with. We had quite a bit of discussion about that the other day, but long and short of it was that we ended up in a situation where we were able to purchase some excess capacity, excess sewer capacity from one of the developments here in Foxborough that allowed us to buy it back at a relatively low period of a low price of $4 a little over $4 per gallon, and then sell it and then now we can sell it at like $40 to $42 a gallon back to a development in Sharon. That money is important because we're at a point now where we can. We're at a point now where that money is helping to pay off the debt service on building a new plant in Mansfield, and so we're getting closer to paying that note off, and this money is actually helping in that effort. Now, as far as the MS4 issue goes, that's a case where the federal government and the state government have come together to require a situation where the environmental protection agencies have required us to monitor the cost of monitor our sewer, our water runoff, water discharge into catch basins, things of that nature, and into the brooks and streams effective in each one of the cities and towns. Foxborough is no different than any other city and town in Massachusetts. We are looking at ways in which we can pay for that without affecting the operating budget in the process. And what we're finding is that it's very difficult to do that without more or less establishing a new method of paying for that, and what is known as a wastewater utility, or a stormwater utility rather is the better term. So Chris Gallagher and Lance have been reviewing this with some of the regional experts in this area. They are looking at ways in which it can be done, and how this would be paid for. They don't know, how it would be paid for yet, and how it will be charged out. And they don't even know how much it's going to cost yet. And so they're in the process of trying to develop a draft budget as to what it would cost to properly do this in Foxborough. So we don't know what the cost is yet, and we don't know the method yet. But there are different ways it has been done in other communities where they've charged so much per household, so much per business, so much per square footage. So, you know, if you have a large roof on a property, that the amount of water discharged from the roof actually gets considered, as well as the amount of pavement that you have in an area gets considered as well. So, it's also a way to and nobody's exempt from this, by the way, because you're talking about nonprofits, churches, etc. They would all be required to pay for this as well. So this is another way of addressing that cost and sort of equitably sharing the costs across the entire community. So we don't have the answers to that yet. This is strictly an investigation to see how this would work, and then they're going to report back to the Board of Selectmen and to the Water and Sewer Commissioners as well, and all the different, and the town meeting ultimately as to what this is being. But this is not, my understanding, this is not something that's going to be presented as an article for this year, but it's something that's on the horizon and we have to keep close watch on. Okay.
Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
Any questions, Jack?
Somebody tossed out a number of $500,000. Now, when they did that, they said, all right, it's going to cost us so much for this, so much for that, so much for that.
Yep.
What are those big ticket items, and how realistic is the scope? I'm not looking at 475 versus 500,000.
Yeah. So
10,000 versus 500.
That was just an average number thrown out based on the size of the community and the amount of streets, et cetera, that we have. But I do think what that is for, Jack, is to take a look at, and we're going to have to replace catch basins in certain areas, cleaning catch basins. We're going to have systems put into catch basins that separate the oil from the sediment as well, so that we can help keep the streams and waterways clear. It's a maintenance. It's really more or less a maintenance program for our waterways, and it's going to have to fix some of the existing waterways and spillways that we have. So because they're not built properly, and so we actually need to improve upon that in many cases as well.
Don't most of the catch basins have oil separation systems?
Not all of them. Not all of them. The newer ones do. The newer ones do, Jack, and you're right about that. But there's a lot of them that don't. Okay.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I had already tried contacting Chris last week when this came out, and people were asking if we could get him in front of us again, at least to answer some of these. So thank you, Bill, for doing this. But it's been floated an idea about whether or not this might be the type of focus that could a multi-town coalition like we have with our tri-town water treatment and sewer system. If would it be a management system like that to be able to keep things abreast of
it's
mandates and state laws and rules and that kind of stuff, that shared experience with that, and have a dedicated team that just does that, as opposed to having a poach labor and time from departments across many different towns to take care of or try to keep up with ongoing mandates.
Well, I think that's highly possible, Tom. But I think what's happened in many cases is that there have been, like for instance, in SEMRC, for instance, the reason why it made sense to form SEMRC was because it was a better vehicle to take in money from the state. Because there was actually an incentive built in for us to do it that way. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen one done for this yet, but it doesn't mean it's something that we can't consider and we shouldn't be thinking about, because it's a good thought. I mean, we do regional wastewater treatment. I don't see why we couldn't do stormwater management on a regional basis as well, and create almost like a district, if you will.
Right. That's what I thought might be a more feasible and more adaptable to whatever additional mandates are going to come down the pike.
Yeah.
It's going to be.
Yeah, it's none of us. I can tell you that most of us like to push away from the table, even having the conversation about it, because we do have to deal with it, and it's a reality. So we're trying to do it, to come up with the best solutions possible, given what the scenario, what it is.
Well, Roger Hill did explain this, or at least kind of warned us 4 years ago when the stuff came before the warrant article for the town to pass, and but certainly the scope of how that was going to be implemented and how it was going to be handed down by the state and requirements, as I don't think anybody was really prepared for that timetable or how often things need to be tested or who's going to be doing the testing. Even if the state has the capacity yet to uphold its mandates with a crew that even investigate or inspect towns.
Well, I do think that the problem you're going to run into is that we're running out of time in terms of how much patience the feds are going to have with us on this issue. There was some thoughts that under the Trump administration that you might see this thing get pushed back or pushed out altogether.
Right.
But that didn't happen. So I doubt very much you'll see it under the Biden administration that it gets pushed away. I think if anything, they'll start looking to enforce it pretty soon.
Especially if there's fines involved.
Yeah. So, okay. So, yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Bill.
Looks like there's a question.
No, you didn't have a question. I didn't see you. Sorry, Dan. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just think you're going to see a lot of changes in this going forward over the next couple of years. Tom, I do agree with you. We've been hearing about this for a little while, but I have a little background in this, and it's going to unfold. I don't want to say there's going to be a lot of changes made. They're certainly going to set standards and expect we meet them, but at the same time, like they're going to continue to expect, same thing with carbon emissions, same thing with batteries, et cetera. They're going to keep raising the standard. And I think, and Chris has the right approach, not jumping to anything, overachieving, because in 5 years, you might be way behind the 8 ball in a way.
No, I think I agree. I couldn't agree with you more, Dan.
I think, especially with this administration, you're going to see the bar pushed and pushed and pushed. Not that we're not going to meet the current needs or anything, and not that we can't, work with other towns, but other towns are going to be in the same position we are. Other states are going to be in the same position we are. I don't want to say everyone's behind the 8 ball, but, we're only going to keep pushing that bar up. So I'm not sure what the solution is to that, but for everyone to keep in mind, I wouldn't expect us to meet these on a yearly basis, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I would expect that, all right, we set a plan, we hit the plan. Now they've raised the bar. Now we have to raise our bar. So, just for food for thought that, this is going to be a moving bar and that we're going to be expected to meet a lot of different things. So just so everyone knows.
Just so you know, Dan and I did not rehearse this beforehand, but to piggyback on him again, having been in the liaison last year with the water department too, and to have them hand out these or just pull out these huge binders from the state for the additional testing and requirements down to the trillionth now, because technology allows you to measure things that even towns probably can't invest to be able to measure for themselves. So they're reliant upon outside vendors to come in and tell them that you're not meeting these standards for, was it the polycarbonate or PCBs, like I said, down to the trillionth. And it's just added more. Everybody wants to be environmentally conscious, but there's a point at which there's, it's an infinitesimal level to be able to keep to without encumbering either or like large financial encumbrances by the town to maintain that, or not be paying fines. And just, but I think any way that they can, we need to be prepared for more than just a $500,000 increase per year, as what we're just was proposed, or what they said might be happening in the newspaper.
Yeah, Tom, I agree with you 100%. And I think those costs are actually going to kind of skyrocket and then drop a little bit, because what's going to happen is you're going to see, the costs are going to be the costs, right? But then it's going to be a business opportunity for somebody else who's going to then, you're going to see all these businesses spring up that support this, and then the costs are going to drop again.
Right.
So
I asked them last year.
I don't know how we budget for something like that, but it's just something that we're going to see no matter what. And I don't know if it's whether it's over 5 years or over 10 years, how the budget adapts to that. But I guess I don't want to say it's a moot point, but I at least don't see how you could predict both how the politics play into it and how the costs play into it, how anyone would really be able to see, like, okay, we can see in the next couple of years budget, we're going to have to prepare for this, and then we can prepare for it to drop. I just don't see how anyone's going to know how to predict that.
Yeah, it's going to be a cottage industry. There's no question for new businesses to pop up as result in response to this. There's no question. So your thoughts are both your thoughts are right online. I personally don't know how to predict this one either, but I do know that what the issue the thing I do know is that I think the time's getting shorter in which we're going to see something actually be required of us to do something. And I think now with the change of administration, I think there's more of a focus on the environment than there was in the past. And I do think that we're going to start seeing some impacts of that sooner rather than later.
Okay, Bill. Thank you for the update. George, Marie, and Bill, thank you for coming tonight. I know you guys spent a lot of time talking to us, so we really appreciate it. And if we have any further questions, we know where to reach you.
That's right. So yeah, don't ever apologize or feel bad. We're here to help. Any way we can make town meeting run easier, let us know. I mean, it's sort of the most unpredictable thing in the world is dealing with town meetings. So the more that we're prepared, the more you put these questions on us, the more it's easy for us to be prepared for those things. I've been doing this for 37 years now, and I will tell you that I've yet to know how to really truly prepare for a town meeting, because you never know what's going to get asked. You never know where the questions will come from. So I consider these to be a really good dress rehearsal. So I appreciate all the questionings and the line of concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
Good night. Okay, a couple of housekeepings for AdCom. Next week is the last group coming to AdCom, and I believe that's the public safety, building inspection, and a fire and SEMRAC. So next week should be the last one. That's one item. Second thing, I just want to maybe just clarify to the whole AdCom is, I don't know how many people saw the selectmen meeting last night, but there was a clarification to what Mike said last week about, the board of selectmen approved the 2.5% budget. So I just want to clarify, if you haven't seen the recording or you didn't watch the meeting last night, the 2.5% budget increase was presented by Bill to the selectmen, but there was no vote taken by the selectmen, that they say, fine, it's 2.5%. The selectmen will be taking a vote towards the end of March, and that's when we'll have the final budget. So once that is done, AdCom will have the final budget. Just want to clarify. So if somebody thought last week that the selectmen already approved the 2.5, they did not. I know a couple of people raised their hands, so go ahead.
Well, Larry, I just wanted to ask you quick, given all the work that each department head has done and also town manager has done, everything seems to be based on this loose recommendation of 2.5%. So do we really think selectmen at this point would say, hey, no, you can't have it? Right. I mean, we'd basically have to start from scratch, right?
Right. Well, we don't start from scratch. They have to, but I cannot speak for the board of selectmen on what they'll do. But
yeah,
I know what you're saying. I do.
All right.
That would seem pretty confusing. If do you have any idea what the selectmen are looking to do at this point?
I don't know. So if you want to get an idea what they're going to do, you have to watch the meeting.
Right. Okay.
I don't want to say I know what they'll do, but I really don't. So
you don't think they have to go along with it at this point, right? If they reject it,
technically, the town manager presents a budget,
right?
Or and then the selectmen could say yay or nay, whatever they want to tweak. They can if they want to, they can. And then when it comes to AdCom, all we can do is cut it down again if we want. So at the end of the day, it's up to at the town meeting. It's up to the voters to accept it. To accept our recommendation. So yes, I really don't know what the selectmen would do. I don't. Somebody raised their hand. Oh, okay, Dan.
Yeah. I just have a quick kind of a question or a point of interest here. Have we received any, and maybe I'm not on the emails, I don't know. But I think 2 out of the last 3 meetings, we've had a selectman actively involved in our AdCom conversations. Are they not getting the time needed to ask questions on their own meetings?
Okay.
Yeah. Not welcome, and maybe we invited them. I don't know. I just don't know.
Okay. Okay. Let me take a step back. at yesterday's selectmen's meeting, there was a discussion. One of the selectmen asked, EdCom has all the department heads that will come in and present the budget. So the selectmen asked, are they going to come to the Board of Selectmen? So Keegan's response was, yes, if you want them to, but usually before COVID, one or two selectmen will sit in the room at the EdCom when we have our meetings, and they do listen or they do ask questions. So the way they're doing it now is they're not going to the selectmen. The departments are not going to the selectmen unless the selectman really wants, let's say fire department to come in. So the suggestion was that if they want to listen in fact, I believe most of them, in fact, all of them are probably listening in. Some will Zoom in because if they want to ask questions, they'll Zoom in. But if they just want to listen, they can. And if you notice on the town webpage, the selectman is posting that they are attending EdCom.
Okay,
for open meeting.
I wasn't aware of that, and I just thought it was odd because I remember seeing one or two selectmen at all of our meetings last year in person, and I don't know. We made it through meetings without having them actively involved, and then Stephanie and Leah were actively involved, and I was confused as to whether this what the deal was. So thank you.
So, okay, I mean, so then I am sure the rest of them are watching us online, or
they're not watching it now. They're watching it tomorrow on
yes.
YouTube, same as we do with them.
Yes, correct. Tom?
I guess it would have been nice to have known at the outset that we were doing the reconnaissance for the Board of Selectmen. We always thought that they were in parallel, that they would meet with us and they would meet with them as well. But if they're just sending a representative here and watching it like this, it sounds maybe we have formulated more questions or maybe would have asked them differently.
Well, we have. I'm
not saying we haven't asked questions, but we might have asked more or in a different frame of reference, knowing that we're the point people for the Board of Selectmen.
Well, we're not the point people for the selectmen. We're doing our what EdCom is doing. They're just listening and watching us because now it's broadcast on TV, it's recorded, and they can join us. They're given the Zoom access code. So we're still doing what we're doing. We're not just because they're listening or watching. We don't have to step out of the game. We're not out to impress them. We're doing our job. So whether they're watching us or not, it's really immaterial. We're going to ask the questions we're going to ask. So I know what you're saying, but
I think they just really want to hear Bernard's expert opinion.
Go ahead, Bernard.
Yeah, no, actually, I think this is a very good point because in those two specific examples we just saw in those past two meetings, yes, one could argue is that the points being raised, one could argue is why these were raised during, let's call it the outcome meetings. But I don't know what Larry thinks, but I would see two ways. One, it's a compliment to our meeting setup because we set up the forum in such a way that, again, remember, we are all from the same family, right? So at the end of the day, if you look at a lot of the questions from Leah tonight, a lot of us, we've discussed that privately. Again, we respected the meetings, but those inquiries actually is serving to all of us. In other words, the question that Leah had for Bill, I was really impressed in the sense that it's really helping all of us. Now, as far as if I could use the term, using the outcome forum as a platform to ask their inquiries or question, maybe again, as Larry said, given how now we are meeting, many of them may feel, let's call it a bit more empowered to use the platform. But I think, again, in my opinion, it's a good compliment on how we conduct our meeting. Now, if there is a feeling that, the outcome platform is being leveraged for what they could be doing separately on their own during their own meeting, maybe that could be addressed. But in a way, I see, at least, this is my opinion. What I have seen in the past two meetings, I have not seen it before. So I'll be very clear. So it was actually twofold. One, pleasing to see the questions coming up because a lot of us had the same questions and could not ask them perhaps like that openly. So it's very useful, and hopefully in like tonight, I'm hoping that Bill will follow up in a lot of what Leah has been asking, along with Leah will be, let's say, talking to the other Board of Selectmen to press on getting all these info that will be beneficial to all of us. So in that sense, I mean, Shawn will tell you, Shawn, I don't want to use you as a forum, but for the past 2 years, Shawn has been asking those same questions. And guess what? I don't want to say it went on deaf ears, but Leah tonight, by asking in many ways these questions in a forceful way, perhaps will have the interest of the selectmen doing so. So again, using our platform. Now, again, is using our platform the right way for these? I go back to the same thing. It's beneficial to the town itself. Now, I don't know what Larry will think. We have one more meetings left, and then we have to vote on, I mean, we have to think of the warrants article, but my point is that maybe that's the question going forward. Two things, if we think about it. All these meetings, the fact that they are televised and they are being done on Zoom, I think is extremely helpful for anyone who will be coming out town hall, because they will see how we, non-paid voters, we are addressing all issues out of their interest. Because I go back to the same thing, and then this is where I go back. The only thing of interest to most town residents is their property taxes. That the only thing we will hear from them is why it goes up. Mm-hmm. I go back to the same thing again. If they don't take interest to our meetings, doesn't matter if it's conducted by the Board of Selectmen or us, they will be surprised that in 5 years, it will more than double for the reason we talked about. So as far as the role of the Board of Selectmen into our meeting, if anything, I think like those past two examples, there could be an argument that we've provided an easy forum for them to present a lot of what we would be asking. And we're asking to the same, let's call it executive. So these are my thoughts.
Bernard, if I may add, I think I just want to clarify to Tom and to others. EdCom, we always ask detailed questions. You're right. This year is slightly different because other people are watching and it might be a first time. But regardless of what the Board of Selectmen is doing, it's really that's up to them. If they tell Bill Keegan we want 10 departments to come in and give us the budget, they'll do it. But the point I'm trying to say is we're just doing whatever we always have been doing. And then some Board of Selectmen members are leveraging our meetings for them to ask a few questions here and there. So all I'm saying is that it's the same stuff we've been doing. It's just 2 years ago, before COVID, it was never taped, never recorded. And if you don't come, if you read the minutes, you really can't tell sometimes what was discussed. So I think what I'm trying to say is we've been doing the right thing all along. We've been asking a lot of questions. Lately, I think that's a little more sensitivity because maybe a lot more people are watching and there are people joining us asking questions. But go ahead, Paul.
Sorry, Larry, but Dan, I mean, maybe I'm speaking wrong for you, Dan, but it does feel different even from last year where Steph or Stephanie or Doc would show up out in the audience. So the picture, we're all sitting around that table. The presentation is facing us. They're in the audience, and very rarely did they ask questions, right? So the Zoom is creating a different dynamic here. And I don't know, to Dan's question or to Tom's comment, what the intent is.
Wait a minute, Steph always asks questions.
But I think Seth cut her off.
Wherever she was sitting, she was asking.
But I think I just want to piggyback what Bernard said. Some of the questions in the past, if Stephanie were to make a comment or Leah made a comment, it's also helping us because some of us might be thinking about it and we didn't ask the question. So I think it's not hurting us. It's making it more informative for us. So the point is, you're right. It's this year is different than last year, and last year is different than prior years. So a lot of things have changed. Who knows what next year the format will be? But the way I say it, as far as AdCom is concerned, we're always asking the questions we want, and we have the liaison meetings where, you know, we ask different questions. So
I want to be clear, Larry. I'm not saying
No.
it's a bad process. In fact, to someone else's point, we did see Leah asking questions we have asked before, and it felt very different when she did, right? In a good way. So
yes,
I'm just saying it's not 100% fair.
Agreed. And I know you're not criticizing. I know.
I wasn't necessarily being criticizing either. I was pretty much kind of, it's enhancing. So
yes,
I was going to say, don't leave any questions unasked. Don't leave here saying, "Oh, I'm badgering the witness" type of thing. You still have a question. Don't leave it for BOS to be the ones to ask it later on or come back at it later. Ask everything we can right now. I mean, hey, we've never been really afraid of going longer in our times, but exhaust all your inquisitiveness now in front of them, because as Larry's saying, if people are now watching this and at their own convenience and stuff, and they don't feel it, and we don't do a well enough job, they won't need to be brought back for something else. But if we're holding questions back, either to have them come back again later, or because we just thought it would just been going on too long, then you're not serving.
Tom, I need to stop you there. I don't think anyone is holding off on questions.
Okay.
If we have questions, I think they're not afraid to ask. So what I'm trying to say is, just because a selectman or two selectmen or all five selectmen is watching, we don't have to step up our game, because we've been doing that all along. So what I'm trying to say to the whole committee is, keep on doing what we're doing. If you have questions, ask. Don't be shy and ask the questions. So go ahead.
I think this kind of went off the rails from where my intent was. And I don't want Jack to fall asleep on me, so I'm going to make this quick.
He's not. He's staring at you.
Do they not have the same forum that we do to ask these questions?
I believe the department heads are not going in like they're showing up the AdCom and presenting for this year.
So it's up to the selectmen to take it up with the department heads one-on-one.
Yes, they can.
The way we go about it.
Well, the selectmen can pick up the phone and call any.
I understand that, but there's no planned meeting where they get to do something similar to what we do.
At this point, no. What the selectmen is using is they're using AdCom as a forum to get more info.
And I'm totally cool with them leveraging this forum to ask those questions. I was under the impression they had similar meetings with the department heads, not necessarily, in session or anything, but it was my understanding that they had these meetings set up as well. So that makes a lot more sense that they're in these meetings asking these questions, because they don't have the opportunity to in a public setting anyway.
Right. Okay. Right. You're right. I mean, if after watching AdCom, and if a selectman has a question for Chris Gallagher, they'll just pick up the phone and call him. And what do you mean by that? So yes, they are they are using AdCom as a way to give them a little more information, and anything else they want, they can call Bill, they can call the department, or they can convene at a board meeting and have the department head come in. So yes,
Larry, that's new, right? We weren't televised in previous.
We
years.
weren't prior to COVID. In fact, a lot of people fought against it. So I was one of them too. I said no, and then a lot of people say no.
Can I ask a question, Larry? And maybe we'll talk about it later on, but town meeting now under these Zoom meetings, is that all going to be the way it's being done now then?
I don't know. They discussed the annual meeting last night briefly at the selectmen meeting, but I don't know what the format would be. Maybe we'll have it in your backyard, Brad, if it's big enough.
It'll be warmer. Yeah, absolutely.
We'll close up. We'll close the whole street and have everybody, stand on the road.
Well, I just wonder if it's done by this kind of format.
It's not going to be Zoom. As far as I know, it's not going to be Zoom.
Not going to be Zoom. Okay.
Yeah. But, anything else?
Maybe, Larry, if I could maybe just, again, last food for thought, since we were all talking about the 2.5%. Again, this is just my opinion, but I think if we think also how this all came about, 2.5% of $80 million is $2 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nominally, the 2.5%, again, I always call it perceptions reality, $2 million. Now, if you break it down, once everyone will be inquiring where that increase come from. It goes back to what we talked about last week. Over 60% or more comes from the school, right? Who has their own board, who reports to X. My point is, all the other departments, and you'll see it actually, and it's called Article 4. Article 4 will be a column where the town manager basically has his approval on every single budget line items. We also we do have basically our numbers, and that's where, as Larry was saying, there'll be we will actually recite expense by expense the entire $80 million at town hall. And I think for the ones of you who've seen it before, reciting or going over Article 4 takes most of the time. The point being is that the Board of Selectmen also, for every single budget item, because again, the town manager reports to the Board of Selectmen, they also should be way aware, even before us, of those line items. I just think that our forum, because of how we are inquiring into all these expenses, just provide another, let's call it, second set of eye, and for them to, again, like tonight, I was pleased to see that Leah basically forced a point where many of us were trying to get an outcome, and hopefully it's going to be there. But I go back to the outcome. When then you ask what would be the outcome of 2.5%, to me, it's like watching a movie. We already know the outcome. Let's be honest, right? Who's going to tell the school where most of the budget is increased not to have the 2.5%? It's not going to happen. We already know that, to be honest, right? But what happened last week, where Mike mentioned the 2.5% and the Board of Selectmen may not have approved it, well, when they will go through all the items to see what it's made up of, I'm not sure what will they do other than now we get it. But again, I think the outcome forum is perhaps another venue for them to see the reinforcement of how we look at the budget in detail.
Bernard, another way to look at that too is like not just where's the next $2 million going to come from? In 5 years, where's the extra $10 million going to come from?
Good point, Tom. And I think it goes back to what Larry was saying. When Bill at the end mentioned that the good news is we'll get, I can't remember the exact number, but let's say $300,000 in saving in some items. The first question we had is, that means that the source of fund will also be reduced. And what it was, and he said free cash, right? Because it has to balance.
Right.
It goes back to that. So, but these are all good points.
Make a motion to adjourn? Are we all done, Larry?
Second.
You're muted, Larry. I make a motion to adjourn?
Go ahead. Who's second? Okay, roll call. Brad.
Second.
Yeah.
Bernard.
Right.
Jack.
Aye.
Sharon.
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
Paul.
You bet.
Dennis.
Yes.
John Mahoney.
Yeah.
Brian.
Yes.
Tom.
Yep. Let that be Bernard's mic drop.
And me, yes. All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.